I'll get it from Heather. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, I know. So the meeting is streaming right now. We'll get started here in just a moment. Good evening. We will be conducting tonight's meeting in person in City Council chambers at City Hall, as well as virtually using Zoom to allow staff and public to social distance. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting tonight on Wave Channel 18 and online through the city's YouTube channel. If you would like to participate in live public comment via the Zoom platform, please refer to the agenda for instructions. Boomer Bennett from Placer County Youth for Christ will be giving the invocation this evening, and Mayor Andriotta will begin the meeting immediately after the invocation. So Boomer, if you'd like to come up, thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you guys fighting a good fight through the last couple of years. Me and my wife, we moved up from Los Angeles a couple years ago. In the midst of everything, and the way you guys have been handling it has motivated me and my wife to be better community citizens. So I thank you guys for that. I'm Boomer Bennett. I go on high school campuses and I start clubs and I teach kids about purpose, life, and I encourage them to become the best versions of themselves. You guys from afar have been encouraging me to become the best version of myself. So I want to thank you guys for that. Please pray with me. Father God, thank you for this awesome evening. Thank you for these awesome men and women here, Father God, that you've created in your image, Lord. As they go forward this night, Father God, give them the wisdom to communicate with each other, Father God. Give them the wisdom to know, Father God, that we are here for the best interest, Father God, not only of each other, but for our children, Father God, and our neighbors. Give them the ability, Father God, to allow the time that is needed in order for them to come to the best solutions, Father God. And for the individuals here who put their lives on the line for us, Father God, protect their families, give them the confidence to know that you are with them. And for this council, Father God, for our mayor, Lord, give her the boldness, and the rest of them, give them the boldness and the confidence to know that they are doing the right thing at the right time because you called them to do it. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Boomer. Really appreciate you being here, buddy.
Thank you.
All right. All right. It is 6:01. Call the meeting to order. Ms. Scanlon, can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Joyner,
Here.
Councilmember Carlskin,
Here.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Here.
Councilmember Silhai.
Here.
And Mayor Andriotta.
I am here, and I actually forgot to say welcome to the regular city council meeting, but we can skip all that. Okay, Ms. Malikoff, do we have any report from closed session?
There is no reportable action, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Captain Faddis, would you lead the Pledge of Allegiance for us, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for doing that. I know I put you on the spot. I appreciate you doing that. Okay.
All right, so item number 5, agenda modifications. We have one agenda modification this evening. We are moving item 10A to just after item 6, the presentations. So hope that's okay with everybody. Do we have any other agenda modifications tonight? No, seeing none, then okay, we're gonna move forward. All right, so we have our first presentation is a proclamation, 2022-04, declaring April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month and recognizing Kids First for their efforts in prevention of child abuse. And this is especially fun for me this year because I happen to be the vice president of the board of Kids First. And our executive director, Antoinette Manuel, could not make it tonight. So I wrangled Todd Olson and Trevor Hensley, who are also on the board, and they're going to come join me over here for their presentation. All right, are we on? Okay, good. Oh, you know what, Alyssa, can you take a picture when we're all done? Thank you. All right, here we go. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Lincoln declaring April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month. Whereas in 2020, Placer County investigated 3,227 reports of child abuse and neglect, affecting an average of 2 children per household. And whereas all adults and caregivers have a responsibility as neighbors, community members, and citizens of the community to help create healthy, safe, and nurturing environment for children and youth. And whereas safe and healthy childhood help produce confident and successful adults. And whereas child abuse and neglect often occurs when people find themselves in isolated or stressful situations. And the majority of child abuse cases stem from the situations and conditions that are preventable when our communities are supportive, active, and engaged. And whereas effective prevention programs succeed because of meaningful connections and partnerships created between agencies, schools, faith-based organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. And Placer County's collaborative is among the most effective in the county. And whereas for over 30 years, Kids First Counseling and Family Resource Centers has functioned as Child Abuse Prevention Council for Placer County, with 2 locations strategically located in Lincoln and Auburn to serve Western Southern Placer County. And whereas wearing a blue ribbon, wearing the blue on April 1st, and displaying a pinwheel garden in April will serve as a positive reminder that together we can treat and prevent child abuse and neglect and keep children safe. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of Lincoln does hereby proclaim April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month and urges all citizens to join Kids First and its engaged partners as they support each family's effort to keep themselves and their children safe, healthy, and in a nurturing environment. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And this, you guys can give that to Antoinette.
We
So
do
good to see them in
technically need a
person. We
motion.
usually See them on Zoom. I'm sorry, what was that?
We do technically need a motion to adopt the
Oh, okay.
proclamation.
Can I have a motion to adopt my proclamation?
So moved.
Roll call, Ms. Scanlon, please.
Yes, Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskint, Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriotta.
Yes.
It's just so we don't have to call it back.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. All right. Item 6B, Placer County Regional Homeless Task Force presentation. Amanda Leckie and Carolyn Verhagen from MIG Consultants will be giving a presentation tonight on Zoom detailing the first phase of the Regional Homelessness Project. We have them good to go?
Mayor, Carolyn was just joining. I just promoted her, so let's
Okay.
give her just a quick
Yeah,
second.
no worries.
Carolyn, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. All right. Are we on? I had to go out and come back. in
Yes,
order
you
to
are
be-
on. We can hear you and see you. So
All right.
you should be able to share your screen.
Thank you. Amanda will do so. And we'll be up and running momentarily. All right.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting us to present tonight. I'm Carolyn Verheyen. I am a principal and vice president of MIG. We're a planning and design and communications firm of about 250 people, about 14 offices. And I've been honored to work closely with our core team on this project. We're in between phase 1 and launching phase 2, and there's a lot to share with you about our process and our products. And of course, a lot more detail in the phase 1 report, which you all have. Next slide. So we're going to provide an overview of the work that's been done so far in phase 1 of this Placer Regional Homeless Response Process. It's a report generated through a really collaborative process with a focus on Mid and South Placer. Unlike 6-7 years ago when the Marbut report was written, we're taking a very participatory approach involving all the jurisdictions. We also want to acknowledge that there's other work that's ongoing. The continuum of care work, of course, the crafting of the new no camping ordinance, very recently, the partnership between Health and Human Services and law enforcement. And these efforts are aligned and in relationship to the one that we're involved in. There are other conversations in the county, however, that are not associated with this process, namely the Campus of Hope proposal. So next slide, here's an agenda for our presentation and discussion. And you can see pretty much what we're going to cover. I'll try to be brief and succinct and get to your questions and comments as soon as possible. Next slide. So next slide. We had a really robust and active process starting with the summit that maybe some of you attended last June, end of June, and then intentionally beginning with data and interjurisdictional conversations to develop something real for the public and all the stakeholders to respond to. Next slide. We work closely with the steering committee with the participation that you see here. And these folks were really helpful on process. And they were our sounding board when we were planning meetings and debriefing meetings and just keeping the process on track. Next slide. We also worked with an ad hoc group as well. And these were the elected representatives, primarily from all the jurisdictions and the county. And we were really pleased to work with Mayor Silhite and Councilmember Joyner on that group. These two groups, steering committee, ad hoc, they met regularly over about 6 months to guide the process, to provide comments and edits to emerging content as we developed it. Next slide. Another really key group in the process, and you see our process depicted here graphically, was the regional working group. This was also cross-jurisdictional, but composed of people that are close to the issue, either direct practitioners or service providers, others with some type of responsibility for managing homelessness services and or impacts. And in that group, we had Christine Molenkoff and Chief Alves participating on that regional working group. As you can see in our process, we had 3 major steps in phase 1. This just depicts phase 1. Starting with discovery, moving to big picture planning. Then we tried to surface some proven and promising potential strategies that would help both build on and extend the region's efforts. It was extremely participatory, productive, also I'd say difficult at times, which is not unlike what we've experienced doing this work in other places as well. Next slide. We took time researching, reviewing documents, reports, best practices as a first step in this phase, including interviews with people who've lived the experience of homelessness. And this resulted in our Issues, Opportunities, Best Practices report, also known as the Existing Conditions report. Next slide. It's important to know that the strategies that are detailed in this phase 1 report that you've seen are still emerging. There's no consensus yet on these. They await review and discussion with your constituents. The regional working group identified a set of potential strategies, which were informed by their expert opinions, as I say, close to the issue, also by best practices and by the ad hoc members' feedback. And then the plan is to test these emerging strategies with the community in phase 2. Next slide. So July to December was phase 1. Phase 2 begins essentially now to cast the net further to all council members in the Mid and South Placer area, and then to the public for review, comment, refinement, prioritization. And then we'll add detail to the strategies that are prioritized and, desirable from the community standpoint through this phase 2 process. And we'll say more about that a little later. Next slide. So we really like to stay grounded in data and have a shared foundation of facts as we consider what to do about homelessness in the region, how to provide options for the unhoused, and prevent and mitigate any negative impacts to the community. So all the following information that we have to share with you is taken from the phase 1 report. And we want to highlight how important it is for all of you and the public too, to study the data, take the time, study the data, understand the issues, and be familiar with the resources available, already that we're building on, and others that might be suggested as needed, suggested by the data. So I can't really dig into the data presented here too much in our limited time, because we really want to hear from you on the emerging strategies. Are we on the right track? Also, some of you maybe your council has received briefings on the phase 1 report as well. All right, next slide. So as you see here, Placer is one of the fastest growing counties in California, as you know, yet even during this population growth, the homeless count has remained relatively flat, which is not true in other communities, even those that haven't experienced the same amount of growth. Next. So it's critical also to remember that homeless is not a monolithic category. There are a variety of needs and particular conditions and challenges for people experiencing homelessness. It's also important to discern difference between chronically homeless and non-chronic homelessness. Chronically homeless is defined by HUD as having a disability and living in a shelter, or on the street for 12 continuous months, or for 4 separate occasions on the street in the last 3 years. So specific definition there. So it's also important to note, you see at the top there that 73% lived in Placer County for over a year before becoming homeless. There's not a huge influx of people from outside your county. Next slide. So the report includes data around where the highest rates of homelessness are reported in the county. As you can see here, it's mostly concentrated in Auburn, in central Roseville, and along the 80 corridor in Rockland. Next slide. The report also includes background information about both the legal context, and you're all familiar with the 2018 Martin versus Boise ruling, and also about the current capacity of existing shelters. This is about 150 beds, plus 90 for fairly specific, targeted groups. And it also shows the estimated need, which we're thinking is about 200 new shelter beds, based on an assumption that about half of the unsheltered residents would join into that shelter. All right, next. So we highlight these next slides to point out specific information about bed availability, as you can see here, which spans a continuum from emergency shelter to interim or transitional to permanent supportive housing. Next slide. So for each of these types, the entry criteria, so for the emergency shelter beds, you can see the current rules or entry conditions are here, and 290 registering is basically registered sex offenders. Next, so then for rapid rehousing or transitional beds, both those categories, you can see the criteria. Pretty strict conditions to stay in those places. Next slide. For permanent beds, they have eligibility criteria as well to get in and stay in. So you see that there. So next, we did a series of maps and presented them to the ad hoc and the regional working group. It looked at proximity to various amenities, such as healthcare, transportation, food, that kind of thing. And it's shown as a heat map here. And it's overlaid with the range of concentrations of homeless populations in the grayscale. So we want to do an analysis of where are the amenities and where are the homeless. Next. So this one in no way represents recommended sites, but these maps may be helpful when we begin to look at potential locations for siting new housing and or services. So this map shows the places where there are 3 or 4 amenities clustered together, just to kind of zero in on where those are. All right. So before I present an overview of the specific strategies, let me say that they were collectively generated. They were discussed by the regional working group over several meetings, then advanced for consideration by our elected group, the ad hoc committee. And there were a couple meetings with them as well. And then there was a joint meeting that took place in December. So this has been a very stepwise process that takes this next. The next step is to the community in phase 2. So in the report, we've outlined benefits and concerns related to each strategy, along with examples of where they're successful, some best practices, where these things are really working. So that's all just to frame it. All right, next. So this graphic is something we worked with. We stole it basically from King County near Seattle and then adapted it through regional working group meetings and added some things as well. So this shows the impact areas that we described in our existing conditions report and that we've used throughout, and you'll see those in a moment, and you see them here. So we use these different stages or elements of homelessness, the impact areas, to assess the adequacy of the system as a continuum to meet the needs and goals of the region and to really focus investments. So our 5 impact areas, which you'll see our strategies are organized this way too, include prevention. You can see making the experience of homelessness rare, crisis response, making it brief, and housing, making it non-recurring. And at the bottom, the 2 more impact areas are integrated programs and systems, kind of knitting it all together so it's not a bunch of individual, fragmented efforts. And then community engagement and support, which is absolutely critical. Next. So what are we striving for? We had some discussion about this and came up with a working definition of our primary outcome, our overall outcome, which is pretty much to maintain the lowest rate of homelessness in Northern California. So, we played with vision statements and all of that, but the ad hoc didn't really want to talk about that. They really wanted to talk about the strategies and the outcomes, the detailed outcomes, which we've also developed. So you'll notice as I go through the slides summarizing each strategy that we've characterized the level of overall support from the ad hoc group for each strategy. So we wanted you to have the benefit of that, kind of where they landed, essentially. They weren't really trying to develop consensus or, recommendations, because they need you for that. They need all the council members, all the supervisors, and the public to really, land on a package of strategies, right? But they wanted this part to be in the report. And we made the point they made the point they didn't want to approve any strategy until their colleagues could discuss them, and most importantly, the public. So let's go through each of the strategies in turn in our 5 categories, and I'll turn it to Mayor Andrade to take comments, questions from you all. So the first category is prevention. And you may know that there's some prevention strategies that are already underway, like rental assistance and eviction prevention and counseling. But sheltering in particular is an important backstop to prevent people from ending up on the streets. And so here's the strategy to continue to explore the need for an emergency shelter, probably in South Placer. And they were specific to say outside of residential neighborhoods, but with some services that were close by or on site. And we got mixed support from our ad hoc group. Again, all these strategies were developed by our regional working group and then presented to the ad hoc. So they, in kind of a straw vote type thing, they had mixed support, but we're open to further exploration. Next one. So also in prevention category, pretty much everyone was in favor of renewing the conditional use permit for the North Auburn emergency shelter that's already in place, because that conditional use permit is coming up. Next slide. Also in prevention, exploring a safe park or safe camp location, not particularly popular with our ad hoc group, for sure. It is working in other places, and some members of the regional working group were, wanted to open it to further exploration, and a couple of members of the ad hoc too were open to discuss it a little further. So it's on our list. Next slide and section is crisis response, and you see there what that's about. Expanding partnerships between law enforcement and social services to do that kind of outreach and referral and response, navigation support, that kind of thing. And this was very popular with our ad hoc group because it's working. It's working in Roseville, it's working elsewhere as well. Next slide. Explore the potential of a sobering center, which would be short-term respite, urgent care for people who are drunk or high or are having a mental health crisis. Rather than taking them directly to jail, maybe there's a short-term center that they could go to. And the ad hoc expressed cautious support, as you can see there. So that is something we wanted to try out with the community. Next. So housing and supportive services is our third impact area. And we want to explore the possibility of expanding supportive interim housing through this conversion of hotels and motels. We do have some siting criteria drafted by our regional working group, and we'll polish that up in phase 2 and see if we can get agreement on the siting criteria and use that to figure out this kind of thing, where this type of facility might best be located. So the ad hoc group were mostly in favor of this one. Next. Resume focus on additional permanent supportive and or affordable housing and distribute it across the region. So that's important. First of all, resume is important because there hasn't been any permanent supportive housing built in this region for about 1.5 years. So, there's a need for sure. And then distribute across the region. Our regional working group felt strongly that rather than located in one central place, it's best to distribute it further. Okay, next slide. Adopt regional housing siting criteria, apply them consistently. I mentioned that. The ad hoc was in favor of that as well, and the regional working group certainly saw a need for that kind of objective analysis of where housing should go. All right, next. Explore creative solutions to point-to-point transportation. So here, when we interviewed some people who've experienced homelessness, they told us that that transportation was a huge burden for them. It was really difficult for them to get to services or get to places to get food and that kind of thing. So this is an issue and could be addressed. There was some mixed support for that. All right, next. So in this category of system integration and coordination, We want to evaluate and strengthen the coordinated entry system and 211. And our ad hoc group didn't discuss this one, but it's pretty straightforward strategy. Next. Implement regionally compatible ordinances and law enforcement practices. This is pretty important because otherwise homeless folks might just move around to those places that are more favorable to them, where the law enforcement may not be as strict. So some consistency across the region is important to strive for. The ad hoc group didn't discuss it, but the regional working group discussed it quite a bit and was in favor. And there's some progress already being made. We convened a group of law enforcement and public safety folks, and they believe it's important as well. All right, next. Designate an interjurisdictional task force to provide stewardship of and advocacy for this plan that will result at the end of phase 2. So that's important to monitor its success, to compare it to the metrics that we'll build into the plan, and to make sure that it's all working. So that's a strategy that wasn't discussed at ad hoc, but the regional working group suggested it. Next slide. Community engagement, really, really critical. We really need to increase awareness among the community of what the facts are, what the data around homelessness suggests, and what some possible response strategies are, to really create a regionally coordinated public information campaign, essentially, or program to educate folks and keep them informed as to what's happening. Next slide. So our next steps, thank you for your attention. Next steps in our process, next slide, are basically to continue our presentations to jurisdictions. We're going to host some community town halls, some in person, some remote, virtual. We're going to do a statistically valid survey to tap into, people who don't necessarily want to come out to a forum or participate virtually, but may answer some questions like that. We'll also convene a representative planning group, similar to our regional working group, people who are close to the issue, and they will help respond to public input around the strategies themselves and try to figure out implementation around those strategies that are most acceptable and desirable, politically viable as well. So thank you for your attention to the presentation. Look forward to your comments and questions, and I'll turn it back to the mayor.
All right, thank you, Carolyn and Amanda, for that very thorough presentation. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to start with my colleagues and see if they have any questions or comments. Piece by piece. We sure can. Yeah. Carolyn, can you go back to the strategies and just start at number 1, and we can talk about each as we go?
So I have a.
I don't want to interrupt you in the middle of your presentation.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I have a
Yep.
quick procedural question. This is a presentation. Can we have a elongated discussion?
Oh, that's a good point.
It's agendized.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's,
Well, Roseville did. Roseville did. They had a very long
It says what it-
conversation.
It says what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're all here in a
Mhm.
public
I
forum.
just want to be sure that we're doing correctly.
All right. So Amanda, will you bring up the slides, starting with the first strategy there? And then would you like to do it in turn then, Mayor? Just go through them in turn and.
Yeah, we'll just go through them one at a time, and then we'll tell you when we're ready to, okay. So prevention, continue to explore the need for emergency shelter in South Placer outside of residential neighborhoods with on-site services or proximate access to services. Do you guys have a comment or question about this one?
One of the questions, it's a general question. Most of the orange or yellow, I guess, depending on what machine you're looking at, where people in the ad hoc group expressed mixed support, but were generally open to further exploration. When you say mixed support? Was it in, because you use the same term in many different items. Did mixed support mean 50-50, 60-40 type of support or 80-20?
That
Both
was
of those are mixed.
Yes, you're right about that. That was variable across the strategies. So those that received, kind of full support are shown in green. Those who, those strategies where there might have been one or two people even that didn't like it, we're showing that as mixed support. Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did a Zoom poll that was characterized as not an official vote, because remember, the ad hoc members really wanted public input. And so by open to further exploration, they mean open to what do the constituents think? And then what do additional experts think about how this might be applied in the region? So Amanda, am I correct about that? It was, even if one or two of our ad hoc members voted
Yeah, that's right.
against, yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I may,
Go ahead.
So mixed support was-
from the perspective of somebody who was on the ad hoc committee and asked to essentially vote on these things, the general sense that I got, and I think you'll back me up on this, was it depends upon the details. There's not enough information here for us to give you a specific response. So we are open to continuing to discuss that. But in this one, I think what's essential to take note of is the residential neighborhoods part. That's because we are all opposed to the county purchasing homes within our cities, locating those shelters within our cities without telling us about them
Yeah,
in the
there
first
was
place.
100% agreement on that,
Correct.
that has to be communicated and different than the approach
Right.
that was taken last time. But I will say, Dan, for your awareness, you mentioned a poll. The poll was literally like this statement. And then we were asked to like agree, disagree. And my comment on each one was, I have no clue.
Yeah.
And so mine was open to
Agree
further
with
exploration
conditions.
because
Yeah,
there was
they-
no
I
detail.
can't
Correct.
ever understand
Correct.
anyone involved in a multi-phase process that is not ever open to further exploration.
Right, there was no minus like an actual work plan. It was, well, let's find out what you mean by that. And then Paul and I were both, and along with a lot of our colleagues, were very sensitive to, please don't use that poll to indicate that I support or don't support it. We have no idea.
Right.
We need to discuss what it looks like.
That's the
Okay,
way we
let's-
understood it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, renew conditional use permit for North Auburn Emergency Shelter.
Did you have any questions on that?
Oh,
last
I'm
one, Bill?
sorry, Bill.
Actually, I did.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Bill. Go ahead. Can you go back one? I apologize.
She's
Yeah.
on it.
You know, you're talking about residential, emergency shelter in South Placer outside of residential neighborhoods. Are you talking about the Campus of Hope?
No, the Campus of Hope was not a specific strategy that was considered. We made that really, really clear to our ad hoc group that we're not talking about that. That there is no express support coming from the board. It's not a hidden agenda in this process at all. So let me make that really clear, as we did in all of our meetings.
Thank you, Carolyn.
But do you have any ideas on who would run something like this?
Well, we don't know that that's the discussion points, but this presentation is not about Campus of Hope at all.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the reason you see a bunch of us.
Yeah.
That particular concern was, is this a backdoor way to express approval for a project for which has not actually been presented to anybody with the details? And I think that's why you see that in orange or yellow and not another color.
The devil's just going to be in the details.
Yeah.
Correct.
All right, go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, it was my understanding that, and you guys can speak to this, that everybody agreed that to redo this, or is that not true?
No, so this one actually is interesting to me, that the way that it's the worded is almost everyone, but maybe two people on the call deferred to North Auburn community. Almost everyone said, hey, it looks like it should be renewed, but I defer to my colleagues in Auburn because they're the ones who are suffering the impact of it. What do they have to say? Almost everyone except for Paul.
I kind of didn't do that because
But in later meetings you did.
I wanted to hear what they had to say,
Right.
but the reality is that the DeWitt Center was established as a military hospital.
Yeah.
It has been a mental hospital through the years. It provides all of these services. There's an $88 million Health and Human Services building being built there right now. We
Right.
talked about that connectivity to services, transportation. This solves that problem. All they have to do is walk across the campus. And so any notion to me of not renewing that
Right.
seems foolish.
But again, I think the devil's in the details with that is, are there additional requirements that need to be put on that permittee to move forward? Because there have been some issues there. And so I think that we were all very sensitive to Auburn's impacts to their city and wanting to see that as a solution, but also wanting that city to have its issues heard and addressed in that process so it doesn't continue to build and become this endemic issue there.
Dan, did you have a comment on this or question?
No, it's really, I'm going to talk about phase two, I think, when we get there.
Okay.
Because the surveys.
Bill, did you have, no, okay, I won't forget you next time. All right, go on
I
to
used to
the,
forget them all the time.
yeah, go ahead. Okay, so
Unforgettable.
this one is interesting. Explore safe park and or safe camp locations. I will say on this one that hearing from the two of you and other electeds, every person that I have spoke to about this said that there was zero support for this. And Carolyn, I understand what you said about, that's why it's still on here because, you know, there might have been questions or whatever, but it's my understanding that there's zero support for this. And so my question would be, why is it still on the report? Let's just.
There was one from the Board of Supervisors who is open to discussion on this.
Okay.
But we had, for anyone in the room who didn't watch our workshop, what was it, 2 weeks ago now?
Mhm.
We had a really good discussions. We had a workshop where Paul and I kind of downloaded council in preparation for your presentation tonight so that they could be prepared with questions instead of it being the first time they're thinking about it. And I'm not against safe park or safe camp projects. There are some, like you said, that have done really, really great things for some communities. I think part of that is they got lucky and that they're run really, really well. They have really, really well planned out and crafted guardrails. The people who are running them know what they're doing. It also seems like they're usually in higher urbanized areas where their geography is a little different than Placer's geography. So there's one more of a need to figure out that consolidated solution, and two, that it's easier to mitigate for potential abuse of it. So I think that that was some of the concern from our ad hoc group who were opposed to it, is that what does that look like? And what does that do to Roseville? And what does that do if the county does it somewhere? And how does that look? And how do we make it consistent? And I have to say, I think that it also boiled down to there being a lack of trust of it being executed properly and not spiraling out of control. And so I think that's why you see that in red. I don't think I was the only one who thinks, yeah, this can work and does work somewhere, but the not having confidence that it would work here. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah. Look, who staffs it, who watches it, who takes, you know.
What does it
that's-
look like
yeah,
and who's
those
running
are all
it and how do we
questions.
know that it's
Right.
not, our geography is weird.
Dan, do you have a question or comment on this one? Paul?
Probably a good idea.
You think this is a good idea?
No, I don't, that's
Oh,
not, I mean, yeah.
Not a good idea.
Right,
okay.
noting the challenges that
Yeah.
we would have to be able
Yeah.
to figure out what it looks
Yeah.
like here.
We
And
were-
I
We
grilled,
couldn't supervise it, in other words.
Well, we couldn't right now.
we grilled Chief pretty good at that workshop. Unfortunately, he was
Was
a
a hard
trooper.
pass for
I'm like,
that.
so tell me all the things, Chief Alves.
Dan, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
I just continuously have a problem with a lack of definition.
Mhm.
As did we.
Devils are always in the details.
Right.
And I'll go ahead and start on my phase two thing. Going out with a survey where there isn't a fleshed out implementation, you're kidding yourself. then it comes down totally to the wording of the survey question. And I wouldn't have any faith in it.
Right, it's like a poll,
If-
like
if,
political poll.
You know, you have to take, there's a lot of major concepts, philosophies, and potential implementation things that have been encompassed in this. And for you to get a sense of the community, statistically, you're going to have to reach a level of understanding so that your votes are valid. People know they're not just voting on this paragraph.
Right.
You know, they understand what's behind it. And when I read through the report, you know, I'm the kind of person that says, hell, I think we ought to explore everything. So that, you know, part of it, just whether I like the idea or not
Correct.
initially, you know, if
Find
I
out.
knew, you know,
Well, that's
maybe
where
I'm
Paul
reading
and I
it wrong.
came down on everything. It was, hey, I don't see how this works here, and I don't know that I trust who's going to implement it here, but like, I'm one voice of 5. How do I know what my colleagues feel like for our community? And what do I know what my community feels like for my community? Like, I don't feel like I can say with authority anything until this discussion happens.
Oh, were you gonna say something?
Well, just an observation, really. The two of us, along with the rest of the ad hoc committee, did meet, how many times? 6-ish, 7-ish times, and got more information than the general public would before they might respond to this survey. And you can see where we all
Right.
wound up, essentially saying we need more information. And so to jump on decisions made by a community that is not informed much further than we were would mislead us tremendously, I think, and commit resources to a plan that may not be optimal.
Yeah, I will say, I think that the open to further exploration on this one is maybe different than other ones. I think that was hey, it seems like from what we've heard, this probably isn't, you know, because there is no one size fits all solution for all communities. What works in one, you know, geography and one community is not going to be the right solution for another. I think this was us saying, I want to hear from the public. Do you want this? I want to hear from chief. Is it like feasible? And I think I heard, no, it's probably not a good idea for here. It would be too difficult to enforce and too difficult to keep, you know, curtailed. And it would probably explode into something that was more of a problem than one we're facing now. We didn't have that information during these meetings. This is the kind of conversation we wanted to have. Whereas there's others that say open to further exploration that was like, hey, let's flesh that plan out and see if we like the way those details look. I don't know that it's even worth the time on this, since there's 6 jurisdictions that are like,
No. Yeah.
and from my understanding, chief said the police chiefs were pretty uniform and
Yeah.
this is not
Well, that was my
right for our
point about,
community.
let's not waste time on this one, but,
Yeah.
okay, so let's move to the next one. Thank you. A crisis response, expand partnerships between law enforcement and social services for outreach and response. Well, I mean, I think that, I think everyone is doing that to some degree already. I know.
This is the one that
Yes.
we asked chief to put together his dream team list and tell us what resources he could have and to have dedicated staff that was to this
Right.
specifically, correct? Yeah, that it's a great idea, but like it needs to be funded.
Yeah, we can't take 2 of our officers that we have now and move them over. We have to hire.
But I would be interested, is there, I mean, there's a
there-
ton of homelessness funding that's available from the state, that's
Yes.
going to the county. Is this the sort of thing that any of that could be tapped for?
Dan, do you have a comment or question on this one?
No, again,
Again,
nobody could be against
Yeah.
expanding a partnership between
law
social
enforcement.
services.
Don't say nobody, there's always somebody.
Yeah.
And in our case, and I know it works in Roseville,
Very well.
but in our case, you know, funding is an issue. You know, are the grants, are there going to be grant programs from Health and Human Services to fund that in Lincoln?
Carolyn, is that one of the things that could come out of this, where there's recommendations for the funding that might be available through the county on what type of grant programs they might want to look at funding?
Yes, in phase 2, we're going to do some analysis around existing funding sources and match them up to strategies that have some support.
So this
So-
is a huge one that would be, and we'd all be interested to see if there could be paired with potential funding
And-
opportunities.
And that levels of information would be available as part of the survey description.
Possibly. We're definitely hearing your comments and the importance of providing some context and facts and characterizations of these strategies when we go out to the public in a survey. We wouldn't just write a survey testing these strategies up or down. It wouldn't be as simple as that in any case. But we appreciate your comments very much, and we'll consider
It'd
that.
be interesting to see.
I would not
If
want
they
to
said,
see,
would you support a sales tax to expand partnerships between law enforcement and social services?
right, potential funding opportunities. What I would not want to see is I would not want to see that survey look like anything like the poll that we were asked to answer. That poll was a little infuriating, honestly. It was just so lack of context that it just felt like almost overwhelming. I didn't feel like I had any ability to answer it. If I were a member of the public being asked that, I probably would just willy-nilly like choose one that felt like it was most aligned with my core values, not knowing what any of it meant. And then I think we just get data that means nothing.
All everything on this. Okay, all right, let's move to the next one. Okay, explore the potential of a sobering center, short-term respite and urgent care center for people experiencing intoxication or mental health crises with appropriate services and support. So we did talk about this one at length at our workshop. I would agree that what was that?
Turns out it was a no.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's worth, like, what we've been saying, what does that actually look like? How is it operated? What I am afraid of is that it just becomes a drunk tank for people to do what they want. They can go there, get a little rest instead of go to jail, and then they're out doing the same thing. And maybe that's what it's supposed to be. I don't know what value that has if that's all it is, right? And I don't want to fund that. I don't want to man that if that's all that is. If there's a point to it to get people off substance abuse or whatever, then like the first step.
Right. We talked about it at length at our workshop
Yeah.
with Chief, and I was the one who was like, you know what, I've heard mixed things on this. I'm kind of interested in seeing what it sounds like. And after hearing Chief, I'm no longer interested in seeing what it sounds like, because it really sounded like it has not enough teeth in it to dissuade any future
Right.
adverse activities, and almost becomes like a crutch. And I don't think that there's really much of a sentiment in Placer County. Like, one of the themes, which Carolyn, I know you'll support, hearing that the whole ad hoc committee was really, I think, unanimous on, was that Placer wants to be a place where there's compassion. We want to help those who want to be helped. We want to have the resources available. We want to have the resource officers available. We want to have a plan and structures in place to be able to lift those out who are willing to be lifted out. But we also don't want to be a place that encourages bad behavior and encourages continual lifestyle habits that have negative impacts on our business community, on our families who want to frequent parks, right? We don't want to be a place where it's so comfortable and welcoming that behavior continues to be encouraged and repeated. And so there has to be a stick with the carrot. And this doesn't seem like it has.
Right. So this reminds me, last year or 2 years ago on my school site, in the region, well, I guess in education altogether, it became a thing where you create a wellness center for students. You create a room where counselors are available and they set up, like drinks for them, whatever. So if kids are having they're having a hard day, they're having an emotional crisis, they need to talk to somebody, they need a break, whatever it is, because nowadays we have lots of kids with anxiety or whatever. And so it's this wellness center, and there was a whole protocol for, they asked the teacher to go to the wellness center. They could be there for 5 or 10 minutes and then come back to class. And in theory, it seems like a great idea. What ended up happening was kids would be like, hey, can I go to the wellness center? I'm like, well, why do you need to go? Well, because I want to go get a hot chocolate. I'm like, no, you're going to stay in class. And it was a nightmare. There was a very small percentage of students who actually needed to go talk to a counselor or whatever. We shut that thing down in 6 months. And that's what this reminds me of, is a place, a crash pad. I'm drunk, I'm high. I don't want to go to jail. So I'm just going to lay here, and then we're going to pat you on the back and send you out.
Right,
So
it's like the well-intentioned, that's the thing with
Yes.
policy, right? Like, good intentions aren't always good ideas, but how do we take that good intention and like structure it into a better idea? And
No.
that's what I'd be interested in exploring. How do we take the foundational need of what we're trying to address with a sobering center and turn it into something that is a good idea that's going to work both for the individual using it and for the society surrounding it?
So I could be wrong in my assessment, but oh,
So this is one of those where the devil is indeed in the details. It got my attention. I was willing to discuss it because right now, those sobering centers are our emergency rooms. It's
Right.
incredibly expensive
mhm.
to do it that way. It's happening. We're not stopping it. And so in my mind, if sobering centers were located on a healthcare campus, supported with healthcare dollars, but in a much less expensive methodology, I think we should explore that now. I agree with you.
Is that
that-
an alternate model than like what we're talking about here? I mean, that might be one of the, hey, let's take a good intention and put it into a good idea versus what actually, how it's used, or is that?
Yeah, I think that's a good branch to look into. I don't know if that's been done. It sounds logical. It would
Be a good
certainly be
pilot project.
worth, yeah, it'd be worth discussion.
I would think we've got good partners in both Kaiser and Sutter, and that between the two of them, they should be able to come up with some type of pilot program that could test
I would
this.
also think it might be utilized different if it's on like an actual healthcare campus
Mhm.
versus being just like the place you would go to hang out drunk. or high.
Dan, do you have a comment or question on this one? Bill?
Yeah, again, it's the details that are important, to have something like a sobering center, but I mean, to have much more in the way of counseling and treatment. And a more long-term and not just overnight, and then out.
Right, something there that does something.
Yeah.
What did you say, like Otis from Mayberry?
Oh. Yeah, anybody who's old enough to remember the Andy Griffith Show, Otis would just walk into the jail, open the cell, sleep it off and let himself out in the morning. But there's connectivity in a lot of these things, as well as we're talking about sobriety centers.
Right.
You also have to talk about the why of it
Right.
and so the barriers to entry into other facilities. You can't be drunk, you can't be high to get in. So this would be a location, in theory, where you could go get yourself straightened out before being led into and taken into a program.
I would be interested in, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, and if that's what it is, then I'm all for it.
Right.
I'm all for it because we, like you said, we want to be compassionate. I mean, this is,
With accountability, compassion with accountability.
there
that's
has
what
to
we're
be
wanting.
accountability. There has
Right.
to be, if there's no accountability, we're spinning our wheels.
What I was gonna say is I would be interested in turning what Paul's idea when he read that, and that's the thing with the poll, right? We're all reading different things when we see this. When he read that, he immediately thought healthcare campus, which I don't think is what a normal sobering center does or is. I would be interested in exploring what that could look like. And it might be the same thing, right? I was interested in exploring it before I talked to chief, and then I talked to, law enforcement who's like, I don't think so, not here. It might be, we talk to healthcare and we talk to our hospital administrators and they're like, hey, here's why that doesn't work. Or here's why it's not any cheaper than what they're doing right now when they sit it off in my emergency room because I haven't treated them yet. They're just sitting there for free. I don't know, but I'd be interested in finding out
Yeah.
what that conversation is.
And that was one of the challenges for us. The working group was not in the same room or in the same conversation with the ad hoc group. And that's what, from my perspective, really needed to happen. We needed to,
We don't-
all of
we're
our
not experts.
experiences and expertise needed to be in the same room at the same time and have these conversations.
Okay, all right, let's go to the next one.
I'd be interested in that conversation though, with healthcare happening with the police chiefs from the jurisdictions in the room, because I think that interaction of here's how it works, no, here's how it could work might lead to a product or it might lead to a nope.
Yeah, and the flip side of this, what you don't want from that is for a sobering center to be used as a resource, just a place where they know they've got a pillow and a
Right.
place to rest their head for the night. That doesn't mean they're being taken into a shelter. They can just, you don't want that.
That's what I'm saying.
We want to have that elsewhere, which is why we're looking at a comprehensive plan.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so explore the possibility of growing the amount of supportive interim housing by converting hotels, motels into interim housing informed by citing criteria.
So I will say in advance, the only jurisdiction in all of Placer that actually has hotels to do this is Roseville, and they're already doing it. They're doing it willfully, they're doing it well, and they were like all for it, which is why all of the other jurisdictions were overwhelmingly in favor, because one, it doesn't apply to us, and two, if the largest city and actor in our region wants to do it, why would we not support them in that? I mean, that's where that green came from.
That is where the green came
Yeah.
from, but that green is a little darker than it should be. It should be a lighter green.
Yeah, I would support that, because I think that if we had extra, I think that if there was more nuance to it for each jurisdiction, there might have been a more nuanced discussion.
My challenge with it is more of a land use issue. Projects were approved through our communities and through our councils for specific purposes, a hotel,
Right.
not a homeless shelter. And so to come back without consulting the public, without having that conversation again and convert that into a homeless shelter troubles me.
So I think to your point, though, again, it's in the details. It's not in that 3A. I believe that the discussion we had was around Roseville was doing this willfully under the direction of their elected council, and they were having those public meetings, right? So if this happens under local land use laws, under that stricture of councils being able to opt into it, then I think it's green. If we're saying, hey, jurisdictions already said yes, and now the county can do whatever they want, wherever they want, I think we probably got a problem.
Yeah, this is Project Roomkey dollars. This is state dollars.
It's state
So-
dollars, but that doesn't necessarily override unless the state's coming in to do it, right? And so I think that, to your point, that's correct. What does that actually mean? Because I do think that every council, all 6 of us would be like, hey, we were elected for a reason, and our public looks at us when something goes wrong locally. We should be making those decisions.
All right, any other comments on this one?
This would depend on, where people are on the spectrum of homelessness. If you get someone who's recently homeless or something like that, or with kids or something like that, yeah, that they should be moved to something like this. But, on the other end of the spectrum, we have people with mental health problems, addiction. This is not gonna work.
They're gonna need somewhere
They're
with
they're
supportive
gonna go someplace
services.
else. They should be in something like this. They need to be supervised.
That's a good point. Okay, go to the next one, please. Resume focus on additional permanent supportive and or affordable housing and distribute across the region. So I think the conversation that we had at our workshop was, and that you guys had talked about in your ad hoc group, was that, first of all, if we're told about it, because it was very frustrating to find out that there were these homes in Lincoln that that nobody told us about. And it was done on purpose, to my understanding. And that was very frustrating. And none of us want that to happen again.
I'm
And
gonna
then
back you
and
up,
the-
you up real quick, just so the public knows what you're talking about. Because I had a problem with this one. What does permanent supportive mean? That was, there were dollars that were dedicated to purchasing homes, residential homes in our residential communities. That happened here and Roseville, I believe, and Rockland, where they purchased like $650,000, $700,000 homes. And now they are housing 6 individuals who were the most at risk or had the highest, health adverse impacts, who weren't necessarily locals, and have now moved them into a residential neighborhood with like little kids next door. And we weren't told anything about it. It was included in the documents that no one could know until those papers went all the way through. So the county gave the dollars to the Gathering Inn purchased the homes. They placed non-locals most of the time, who are like adult males, unrelated, into these family residential neighborhoods. But then we have all of these actual families who are also experiencing homelessness. Well, why are we not purchasing maybe
Right.
half that amount of house, placing them?
Right, so
I'm just saying that's what
appreciate
you're
the
talking
details
about.
Because I'm like
'Cause I don't-
talking to us because we already
So
know.
an added,
Right.
an added detail is without supervision. There was
Yeah, no
nobody in the
supervision.
house.
They don't
to
have to be
supervise them.
sober. They don't have, it's literally just pick you up as you are. Now I've placed you in a residential neighborhood, and I've made sure that no one in your city knows about it.
And magically, you are no longer homeless. You are now
And so
housed.
that's what we're talking about when she says permanent supportive and we didn't know.
Yeah.
That's what she's talking about.
So, yeah, thank you for that. I
Yeah.
should have explained, but in my
Well,
head,
I
I'm
mean,
like,
we all know,
about
but
it.
not everybody
Um,
knows.
and
You know, it's
so-
too bad that we don't have any feelings about these
All right.
issues.
We
So-
didn't know for 6 months. There's a house that's 6 houses away from mine. I had no idea. And
So
so I'm
if-
like, what's going on?
This is a perfect example of reading. I'm sitting here listening to you guys, and you're saying you're against affordable housing being distributed over the region.
No, that's
Well, that's what it says. And that's why I'm
That's
trying to
right.
explain,
Right.
no. And,
permanent supportive housing. That's,
and
yeah.
I
if they
understand.
purchased homes
My
that were
point
3,
is-
4 bedrooms and they put families in it, I'd be like, absolutely, let's wrap that community
Okay, well,
around the
first of
family.
all, I agree with you. And I'm not even saying that I would be against just single homeless people. I mean, we'd have to have a conversation about that if we know about it. I mean,
Right,
I'm more in favor of putting families in homes, 100%.
right. Help give them an upskill
But I'm
program,
not
get them
even
a
saying
job. and
that
get
I
them
don't
off
want
the
to put any
streets.
homeless person there. But we have to be told and we have to know about it.
And the details matter.
details
So
matter.
I think to Dan's point, this is incredibly vague.
Yes.
It is.
So what does supportive mean? What does permanent mean? What
Right.
does- Are there
Affordable
programs that go
mean-
along
And
with
so-
this? Are you just put
to-
up in a house on
To
your
further
own?
explain when it says distribute across the region, we were very clear on, okay, you shouldn't pick, if you're gonna resume this program, one, you don't get to pick just one neighborhood or one community and dump all the homes there. It should be, here's the need in the community, here's where we're thinking, local governments need to be involved in it. And then it should probably be more appropriately housed. You should pick those who are going to be the most sustainable and be able to like wrap the community around it, right? And then it should be in each community with need, and the families or the individuals who are housed in those residences should be locals. And so that's where the devil and distribution, that's where that came from.
My point is permanent supportive housing is not an and or with affordable, permanent supportive housing.
Right.
Is not an and or
Right.
with affordable.
They're not the
housing.
same.
They're
Not the
two
same.
entirely
It's like
different
saying, would
things.
you like to have a banana and, or a pineapple?
Yeah.
And they're
This
like
is,
the
in
same,
my
they're not.
mind, this is for the rest of your life. You will be provided housing.
Well, which was how you would read it, but really what that program was, is I think there was like a time limit on how long those individuals get to stay in that house before they're cycled out and the next.
That's that program. This isn't specific to that program.
Right, so that's where our discussion was surrounding though, because of the prior, when it says resume, that's what was happening.
So this
before.
drifts into the question of, are we willing as a society to permanently support, provide housing and whatever other programs are necessary for these individuals, in theory, for the rest of their lives?
And that gets to what Bill was just talking about, because I do think that there is a contingency of individuals who have severe enough addiction
Hmm.
and mental illness where they can't provide for themselves.
I
They're
agree.
never going to be able to provide for themselves. They're always going to be wandering our communities. We're always going to be getting phone calls. They're not going to want to accept the help, which is why the state is trying to step in, I'm not sure what that looks like yet, right? But I would be supportive of permanent supportive housing for those individuals, because who else is going to, like, how does that look? Right? Do they live in a creek forever? Right? Like, at some point, you just have to know you're paying for them and you're taking care of them, and you do your duty as a human to try and be as compassionate as possible. But I don't, that slide where there was all these percentages, I mean, there's any number of percentages that could have been on there, but there are a lot of different buckets of homelessness.
Right,
That's
they're
a small sector.
Bill?
I was going to say, there's also the other people on the other end of the spectrum that are not, addicted or mental
Right.
illness. Okay. Those are the people, when you're saying additional permanent supportive housing, you providing with some kind of support or program to get them into employment
Right.
and things like that, so they can move into housing, more
Yep.
permanent housing.
Mhm.
But the thing that Councilwoman Silhide was talking about the people that, are on drugs or something like that, yeah, you're probably going to have to do something for a while. And there has to be some kind of support and guidance. I don't want to say,
Right.
saying,
Here's what's happening. and
yeah, here's what's
here's-
happening. Here's the program you have to follow.
Right. I personally would love to see a permanent supportive, whatever that means, where there's that program of purchasing the homes. I'd love to see placing either those who are like right on the brink, right, where they're
Yeah.
being evicted, or where they are recently homeless, or their families who are experiencing homelessness, and pair them with local businesses, pair them with an upskill training program, and kick them out to a well-paying job at the end of that year.
Mm.
And GSEC had that really, really great. So that's the Greater Sacramento Economic Council down in Sacramento. They just did this really cool upscale program where they took youth who had no prior skills and put them through this IT training. And these kids are working at like, I mean, what
Yeah,
can I
great
not
jobs.
think? No, they're working at across the Sacramento region. They were placed at jobs where they have actual usable, marketable skills, and some of them are making $70,000-$80,000 right out of a 6-month program, 6-week program. I can't remember right now. Why do we not try to be a little more innovative? Not everyone's going to be willing to do that program, but there are certainly those who don't want to be homeless. They want to provide for their kids. They just don't know how.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Adopt Placer County Regional Housing Siting Criteria and apply them consistently.
I'm surprised this one is green because I think that there was more nuance in that. And correct me if I'm wrong in my remembrance of this, but I think there was overwhelming support for we should all be on the same page, but, and that but was bold, it can't override local decision-making ability. So if there's a regional siting criteria, but all of a sudden it doesn't work for Lincoln or it doesn't work for Roseville or Colfax, we don't have to do it. We get to opt into saying, yeah, we like that we're all on the same page. Did I
No,
read the discussion
You
wrong?
got it right. Well, what I don't think any of us wanted was some broad countywide criteria
Right.
that turns into a dictate,
Right.
that turns into you all agreed to this and now you must accept
Yeah,
this.
we like the idea of having consistent citing criteria because, and I think it might have been, was Christine, were you the one who made the remark? I don't remember, but it was, okay, if, 5 out of 7, if you include the county, are all on the same page and then 2 aren't. Well, now everyone goes there that's not. And so you have this disproportionate, you're really not going to accomplish what you want to accomplish
Right.
because there's like the leaky wagon wheel. Right. But also local decision-making ability has to take precedence over, having a dictate.
Okay, any other comments, questions on this one?
Are you guys on
Was
board
that
with
the
that?
last
or would
one,
you feel
Carolyn, or is
different?
there another one?
Hold on, Bill was saying.
Oh, I'm
something.
sorry. Go
Are
ahead.
you on board with that?
I am on board with that. We should have, we should have be, similar,
Aligned.
aligned,
Yeah.
because then you're gonna have people that are gonna say, hey, in Roseville, I can do
Correct.
this, so anyhow.
But
This
would you want
comes
them-
back to land use authority
It
again.
does. Would you want to be told, no, you said okay once, and so now you never get to weigh in again?
Yeah.
Right.
It's all about local control. Okay, was this the last one or is there one more? Explore creative solutions for point-to-point transportation. This one's actually interesting. What was your conversation on this? Because this morning at our meeting, Mike Lucan was talking about some new transportation things that they're going to be trying out. Would that fit into this model? I don't have the name right in front of me.
This
It could. It was essentially, yeah, it could.
Yeah.
It's a small pilot program. But yes, the answer to your question is yes.
It was more
it could
dial
fit
ride,
into
it
it.
was more, I think. for the
Well, it's
elderly.
dial a ride.
Older
It's,
people.
it's basically, you know what? Let's just buy them an Uber card because that's cheaper
Yeah.
than dial a ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That
pick
type
up
of
people
thing.
and
And-
take them
and-
from
You
point
can
to
go
point.
online or whatever.
The
dial.
discussion around this
Dial.
particular one, when it's creative solutions for point-to-point transportation, was this general acknowledgement of, are we going to have one super center where this is where there's triage for homelessness and we have, diversion court and we have probation and we have, rehabilitation and all of these services on site. And if that's the case, then you don't need much transportation
Right.
because it's all localized. Or, hey, I heard you locals, it might not work for Placer. Keep in mind that Placer includes like over the Donner Pass, which isn't us, and then all the way into North Tahoe. So it's like a very weird county with very different needs. And I highly doubt that somehow the homeless from North Tahoe are migrating down to, Lincoln to be triaged. Like that seems ludicrous. And so I don't know that there's a one-stop shop for Placer where other counties may have maybe more population, but they're they're, more centralized and tighter. And so maybe there's different solutions there. Okay, so if we're not going to have one huge super center, can we afford to do on-site programming? Because sometimes all of that compounds to a lot of expense if you're breaking it up into multiple locations. Okay, well, if you have different locations and where you're able to do your emergency shelter isn't where you're also doing your services, how do you get from point A to point B? And then you probably have to discuss some transportation. And then the other side of the transportation was, but how far does that local obligation go to be accommodating? And does that turn into a, hey, I'm not able to get to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Hey, I have 7 health appointments this week. Hey, right? Like where's the line? What can it be used for?
What's the
When, how,
criteria?
who, right?
Scheduling.
Right. It's what's the budget? What does it look like? How should it be used? Do we need it? Will they use it? There's a lot of questions. that go into it.
So I'm going to offer up another facet of this. For any of you who know folks who have perhaps addiction problems, perhaps mental health problems, who have suffered homelessness, the smallest of things can send them on a spiral of failure. And if they have to get up in the morning, they've got a doctor's appointment across town at 9:30. They have to get up on time. They have to get showered. They have to get clothed. They have to get out and meet a bus to get across town at a given time. Each and every one of those steps is a potential point of failure. And so in my mind, the more potential points of failure we can remove,
Right.
the better. If they can, that's why I
Streamline it.
keep going back to a centralized campus, at least in North Auburn, the ability for those folks to simply walk across the campus to the service that they need. And they'll still fail. I guarantee you there will still be some who fail, but the ability for those on campus to say, okay, well, you missed your appointment. I got another one at 1 o'clock.
Right.
Come back across at that time. So for me, this is about potential points of failure and how do we limit that?
Yeah, I think this one does come down to what's the best model for our county and where should it be housed and how could it look and how do you try to minimize blocks of access to it being actually, used.
Dan, do you have anything to say on this one, Bill? Okay, was this the last one, Carolyn, or was there one more? Oh, is this the last one or is there one more?
A few more, but we
There's
didn't
always
talk
more.
about any of
Okay,
these.
yeah, we didn't, okay,
At
These were all the working group, yes?
working group,
Yep,
Yeah.
we didn't talk about any of these.
okay,
So maybe Matt and Christine.
okay.
Did you guys
Why-
talk about them in
why-
yours?
This is, a lot of this is implementation. Why didn't you discuss
Honestly,
it? Did you run out of
the
time?
real answer, and I'm sure Carolyn is probably real happy to never have to hear my voice again at some point. There were a lot of points of friction and she was a trooper because there was a lot of, unfortunately, the process started with, I think, a lack of trust because of these parallel proposals between this working group and the Campus of Hope coming and hitting up all of the different communities and councils, and they seemed to kind of align in talking points. And so it felt like is this an honest faith effort that we're here together in a room talking about how does we do this as a county? Or is this like a backdoor way to say, oh no, you already approved it. Look, here's your comments from all of these meetings. And I wasn't the only one who felt that way. It was pretty unanimous across all jurisdictions, feeling like we were in a little bit of a honey trap, whether we were or not. And so I think that we took a lot of time saying, what does that word mean? What do you mean when you say this? What would that look like here? What would that look like here's my concerns. And so the lower hanging fruit where I think that probably all of us, this probably would have been green. I bet it would have been like, who doesn't want to strengthen coordinated entry 211?
Right.
I mean, I may be somebody, but I think we didn't get to some of the ones towards the end and we didn't get towards some of the lower hanging things because we were really focused on trying to parse out the contentious places.
You ran out of time.
And we chose different priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carolyn, go ahead and so scroll to the next one real quick. Okay. Yeah, and for law enforcement. Okay, go ahead, next one. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, of course, everyone is in favor of regionally coordinated public information.
And the reason we
Yes.
got to this one is because on our first meeting, we had so many, like, I don't even know how I give input before we kind of clear the air, but everyone was like, I think we can start here. Like, who's not in support of this? And everyone was, right? And so
Okay.
that's where we started.
Okay, go to the next one. Oh, that was it. Okay, thank you, Carolyn, for that. Okay, any last comments really quickly before we go out for public comment? We'll come back in a second. No, okay, all right, let's do public comment. Mana Bass, you've been so patient. Thank you for coming. Go ahead and come up and speak, and just want to say thanks for all you do. You are a hero, our homeless hero.
Thank you,
Yep.
Madam Mayor and City Council. My name is Mana Bass. I have served on the Homeless Task Force for over 3 years, and I've led the Adopt a Creek program it'll be going on 3 years. I also had the opportunity, my team actually conducted the pit count, the point in time survey this year, along with the support of LPD, probation, HHS, the salt mine, okay? So I'm here tonight to just make sure that you have Lincoln specific data. And the data I'm gonna give you tonight is just numbers. That's it, just numbers. As we begin this discussion on homelessness. So our numbers for Lincoln our number is 47, okay? The breakdown was as follows. 32 live on our creeks, okay? And I could be specific, but I won't tell you that tonight. 9 do not live on our creeks, they live around town, okay? Both of those populations, 32 and 9, we know them. Officers know them, you might know them, they're known. Then there were 6 who we categorized as new. They were either new street campers or new car campers, okay? So again, 47 breaks down 32 creek campers, 9 outlying areas, all known, and about 6 then we would call new homeless. Interesting observation. Several of you were on the June 2019 tour of our homeless camps. At that time, it was at the corner of Joyner and Auburn Ravine entrance to Auburn Ravine Park, Moore Road. June 19, our homeless count was supposedly 70 to 80. Okay, fast forward 3 years later, there has been no increase in homeless numbers in spite of COVID, in spite of a lack of homeless camping ordinance, in spite of pretty much any enforcement, okay? No increase in homelessness here in Lincoln over these 3 years, but a decrease of homelessness, 23 people. And again, my team, we can tell you individual names of those 23 people that are no longer at the creek. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you.
Hold on.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah,
Who is that?
thank you for the, isn't that Mike?
Yeah, but are you done? Do you have more information?
I would just want to say thank you.
Oh,
That was all.
No.
That was it, I was
no,
done.
Stay here for a second. Thank you. That is some amazing data. And I know we all appreciate everything that you do so much. Did you have? a
I did
question?
have a question. When you said 6 new street or car campers, are those non-locals or are those new locals, or do you not know?
Right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Those are new non-locals.
And do we know where they came from, or do we not have any ideas?
I can give you that information from the top of my head, but I'd rather give,
Would you follow up if you have it? If you don't,
Uh-huh.
that's okay, but I'd be really interested.
I would have that data.
Thank you so
I just don't want to
much.
misspeak.
No, I appreciate
thank
it
you.
so much.
Did you have a
Sorry to put you on the
Yeah.
spot.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, do you know where the 23 went? The 23 that are
I
not?
do.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, you
I
do?
do. I know very specifically where, again, 23, off the top of my head, I can tell you specifically where they went.
In general, I mean, you know,
Mhm.
and just
Now-
go
When you
back to
give us
whatever
that,
community.
that information on the 6th, could you include that information in that email on where the 23
Right.
Uh-huh.
did?
Yeah,
Sorry to ask so much, but
That's
I think
okay.
it'd be very
I-
informative.
I am here to say that our team is more than just glorified garbage picker-uppers. Okay, we
You guys are
We know
amazing.
things.
You're
We're
amazing.
down at the creek every week. Okay, so I would love for our team to be continued in the discussion. And we do not operate. One of the things I'm most proud of, and Christine as a leader of our task force, Lincoln, you guys, we are a model of collaboration between community citizens, between the police, between the county probation, between county HHS, between all the, I listened to the video of your workshop. We connect with ongoing, the salt mine, Seventh-day Adventist, St. Vincent de Paul. Okay, everybody in town, we work with them to decrease the amount of garbage that comes down there, I'll even say, we control the amount of help that our campers receive. So we have something going here at this town with that collaboration that I would just strongly encourage us to build on.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because I think that this was going when I first was elected, right? But it's newish, right? Because didn't you bring it when you came here and you weren't here that much before
So I
I
think
was
it's, for
elected?
the public, I think that's an important distinction. When Mana is talking about the homeless task force, that's local, that's
Right, so the
Lincoln.
one that she
That is
sit on
not
is a-
this discussion we're
Lincoln
having.
has a very innovative, what she just described, local homelessness task force that is separate from this county thing that we're talking about tonight, that Christine brought as a model, I think, from where your prior jurisdiction, but you were only here, what, like a year and a half before we got elected? All right, so my question is, this 23 reduction, that's significant. That's a significant percentage
Amazing.
reduction. Do we have any data like that before this task force started? And I feel like we have every reason.
So understand that reduction could be they're in jail, they passed
she knows where they
away.
went.
She knows where they went, but I'm just saying, it could be
And-
any
and-
number of things.
And Paul, he is correct.
So,
It could be a number of things. I'm not
Right.
saying they are now living in a supportive
correct.
housing with the job.
well,
and-
but there's different. So again, back to our compassion with accountability, right? We want to connect people with jobs and with supportive housing, but also we don't want to make it so easy to live in our creeks. And I think that the model that we have is in that direction where it's, like you said, we're wanting to provide services and to provide help, but also don't want so much garbage that we're having to clear out all the time. Don't want to over incentivize it. And is the model maybe decreasing who wants to stay and who goes? It's a question I'd like to explore.
Yeah, we would love to be in that discussion.
Yeah.
I
And
have
you
opinions on
absolutely
that.
will be
I
part
would
of
love
that
to hear your
conversation.
opinions on that.
Yes.
We'll follow up.
Yes, you will absolutely be in the conversation. We
Sorry to
appreciate
hijack you
your
at the
team and everything that
microphone
you
here.
do, Mana.
So I have a
Go ahead.
question for you, and you may not be able to answer it. As we looked at the map of areas of concentrations of homeless, there were sections of Rockland, Loomis, others that were white. It said none. Are they doing things that are very, very successful that we don't know about and can't duplicate, or is that data simply not available? Do you know?
I do not know the answer to that. I would say there are probation officers and Lauren Evans, our HHS social worker, that works in those jurisdictions. They would know the answer to that.
I think it would be useful for us to have that information because for me, that was just a blank in the map. It wasn't valid
You
data.
know what I would love? I would love to workshop this again and just be able to bring in our homelessness task force
Yeah.
and talk about what we're doing in Lincoln, what's working, what do you need from us? What do we need to know as part of these broader county conversations? And how do we, like you said, how do we build on something that is innovative and it seems to be working and going in the right direction? And how do we make that permanent and how do we help? And I don't think we've ever had the opportunity to have that kind of roundtable discussion. I'd like that. I don't know if anyone else would like that.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh,
So I just want to say I'm looking forward to seeing several of you at the creek in the next couple of weeks.
yep, we'll be there.
And
We'll be there.
I'll be there.
And Dan, I think your name's not on there, so I'd be more than willing to sit down with you and do something individual with you, so you get that same thing. Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much,
Thank you
Mona.
for indulging our questions.
Is there anybody else in the, go ahead, Mr. Chapman. I know.
That's why I said, let's just have a workshop.
There we go. Thank you. Byron Chapman, 12 Bridges area. Madam Mayor, council members and city staff. Couple of the items that I got out of great information, by the way. I think if the public could grab hold of even a portion of what we've covered here tonight, that would clear up a lot of issues. The question I have to ask more than anything else is, what happens with the homeless person who wants to remain homeless? They have pushed away from society. There is no alternative out there that they want to embrace, and they just want to be where they want to be, and they'll go from wherever. So that's just the question. I think sometimes we assume that it goes somewhere and it takes care of it. Not everybody goes to that beat. They've just had it for whatever reason it may be. The other issue, it was talked about housing. As you discussed, you have a huge home and you've got 6 or 8 people that are individuals and there is no supervision or anything of that nature. I think all of us at one point in time or another, when you drive through your own hometown, you get to notice in any neighborhood that you go to. And it's not 100% effective, but it's pretty much into the 75, 80%. If you go to a neighborhood, I don't care how much the houses cost or how much they don't cost, you can pretty much drive down the street and go, homeowner, rental, homeowner. Oh, yeah, there's a rental on the corner. You can tell. And the reason for that is the grass is not watered, the bushes aren't cut. Newspapers are just all over the place, but there are people that's going and coming. And you automatically know, they're just paying rent and they're waiting to go somewhere else. The back fence is falling down. They don't care, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's important if through this process, you look at that. And again, I can't state this enough. It's a cliche, but it's so true. A lot of people, when it comes to taxes or having a venture like this in a neighborhood where they'll go, that's a great idea. And I think we should have taxes raised. I don't want mine raised or no, I don't want that. And I think we should have housing for that to help either the family or individuals, just not so close to my place. So I think we have to get past the whole idea of the where and the when. And I think what you pointed out was very true. It's simply information. There's nothing wrong with a neighborhood getting around the process instead of being, I'm not saying dirty laundry on anyone. It's just a matter of, I don't know too many people that have not heard and or wonder about how do we handle this problem. I think this is, nothing else, is a good place in which for us to get to. We just need to get there. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Okay, anybody else in the council chambers? Anybody on Zoom, Gwen?
Yes, Mayor. Albert Shiver, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Albert Shiver, Moore Road. I'd just like to make a comment watching the presentation, and this is kind of directed to the 2 ladies doing the presentation. I listened to the presentation and I looked at the list of participants in the different groups, and it goes to Miss Bass's point that I don't see a lot of people that are actually in the field doing the work that knows what works and what doesn't. No offense to anybody that's on the list. But it seems like, just like tonight, you had all kinds of questions for Miss Bass after she rattled off real stats. It seems like somebody like her would be invaluable to be at these meetings or be on these groups. Thank you.
So Albert, I think what you address is really our concern as well. The working group, which was not listed for you to see, were the folks who have that knowledge, who have that experience. And we would have all benefited from being able to sit around that table.
Yeah, I believe they had, they had like HHS staff, they had the police chiefs, they had the practitioners. What we didn't have was we never were connected with them. And so when we met, we didn't have access to any of that with our questions. And that was a continually voiced, like, hey, we need that information.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Any other ones on Zoom?
No, Mayor. no
Okay,
other.
all right. Close public comment on that item. Bring it back up here. Any last comments or
Yeah, I
questions?
did have one question, which I think is just piggybacking to Dan's earlier, which what does that survey look like? Who is looking at the language before it's sent out? Is that going to be vetted? Is that something we get to see? Is that like a, I've done polling in previous jobs, statistically significant can mean just about anything you want to make it, right? It's all about what you're measuring. You get results and responses based on what you're measuring for. And so I'd be and language matters a whole lot when it comes down to how people actually answer that, which is why, pollsters exist. So I'd be very curious in what that survey's main objective is in accomplishing it. And like, what is it, multiple choice? Like, is it, who's vetting the language? Like, I want to know how it's going to be used. Is it being used to support, how we move forward? And if so, how is it being crafted?
Yep. Well, let me respond briefly to that. We're using a professional survey research firm that MIG has worked with for many, many years on these issues of housing and homelessness. And they would meet with probably our core team, get some information about our objectives, and then draft, though there'd probably be several drafts of a survey instrument, and we would likely involve our steering committee in vetting that survey instrument. That's the provisional plan, right?
And what's the objective of the survey? Like, what are we going to be using it to accomplish?
To cast the net to a representative group across the Mid and South Placer region, to test some of these ideas, probably not the individual strategies worded exactly as they are. It may be different than that, but we want to get a sense of public opinion regarding these issues, public awareness of homelessness, of the numbers, the locations, the resources already in place, and then public opinion around some of these ideas or solutions. So roughly that's the point, because as we know, people who come to community forums or council meetings and all are self-selected. They tend to be the most interested people, either pro or con on the various issues. So this way we can tap into a broader group of community members.
I would just like to voice my only concern. And again, I've worked with firms like this to accomplish policy objectives for what feels like a lifetime now. Although it might be a redacted lifetime comparatively to some of my colleagues. But I would be very concerned or cautious that the development of the language of that survey to take the temperature of public opinion is as neutral and without bias or agenda as possible, because I have personally labored for hours over, should we put an and or an or there, and how does that skew my results? And as you're aware, it does skew your results in some instances dramatically. And so I would just be really wary of making sure that what we're getting back to base our decisions off of is, and it's never going to be perfect, but is as neutral as possible.
Thank you.
So I just want to add something very, very quickly. What was important that is not included in this discussion yet to the municipalities is we talked about Martin v. Boise. We want to be able to enforce our local ordinances. And right now, without a bed for every head, we can't do that. And so how we get to that point where we can enforce our local no camping ordinances, that type of thing. And for those folks that Mr. Chapman mentioned who just simply wish to be homeless and to live along the creeks, we want to help them to move on to another location. For those folks who want help, we absolutely want to get those folks help.
Okay,
So my other observation is Mr. Odo is sitting back here very, very patiently. We've got one more presentation ahead of him. I'm going to recommend
I was just going to do that.
Go for it.
Yeah, all right. So thank you, ladies, so much for your time and for the presentation. We really, really appreciate it.
And can I just give a
Yes.
personal thank you for being very patient with me? I know I've been a little bit of a thorn in your side for the last like 4 or 5 months, and I appreciate that you have been responsive and answering and trying to help guide us to a solution that ultimately I'm much, much, much more comfortable with, and I'm very much looking forward to the public's input. And I'm very thrilled to hear that you guys are going to be putting on public workshops, both like in a hybrid way. So thank you for listening to our feedback.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and really quickly, we're going to move on to item 60, but I just want to apologize to the members of the community who are waiting for public comment. Thank you for your patience. We're going to get there as fast as we can. All right, item 60, new website presentation.
So what I was going to suggest is that we hold that one off,
Oh.
let Eric do his
Okay.
presentation.
I'm fine with that. Are you okay with that, Jennifer? Okay, all right, so we'll do that. We will.
She's like, I gotta be here anyway.
Sorry, I thought you were just going to tell me to move along.
No.
All right, so yeah, Mr. Otto was waiting very patiently. Okay, so we're going to just pause 60 for 1 second, go to item 10, general business. Item 10A, City Council discusses Senate Bill 1383 and provides staff with direction on the city's plan for regulatory compliance specific to continuing with the one big bin concept or exploring a 3-cart system.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Angela Frost, your Environmental Services Manager, and thank you everyone for your patience this evening. Tonight, I'm going to be giving a presentation on Senate Bill 1383. This item also relates to a couple other items on the agenda this evening, so I'm presenting this material first so that there's background information provided before those discussions. And there's only 16 slides. So Senate Bill 1383 was created to divert organics from the landfill in a statewide effort to reduce methane emissions. Organic waste is the largest waste stream in California. From the slide here, you can see that organic material is made up of green waste, wood waste, food waste, and paper waste, which is over half of the waste stream. California also throws away more than 6 million tons of food waste each year, yet we're also a state that deals with a great amount of food insecurity. We know that 1 in 5 children go hungry every night in California. Recovering 1 ton of edible food could provide more than 1,600 meals to hungry people. And as far as emissions go, for every 2.5 tons of food rescued, that's equivalent to taking 1 car off the road for a year. So what does this mean? So when organic waste gets landfilled, it produces methane gas, which is a super pollutant. The super pollutant is connected to climate change, and we've seen many of those impacts in California, just some notably with the wildfires, the drought, the heat waves, and rising sea levels. Thus, the main driver for this new regulation. So the requirements of 1383, which has some pretty aggressive targets. So by 2020, the state wanted us to reduce our landfill organic waste by 50% and then increase that to 75% by 2025. The law also requires that 20% of currently disposed edible food be recovered for human consumption by 2025, which would help with the food insecurity. And I'll note that this is a statewide target and not a jurisdiction target to meet those percentages. And just quickly to go over the jurisdiction responsibilities, we will need to provide organics collection services to all residents and businesses, establish an edible food recovery program, conduct education and outreach, procure recyclable material, and recovered organic products, secure access to recycling and edible food recovery capacity, and monitor compliance and conduct enforcement. So just a couple things. And so to get started, the first requirement is to provide the organic waste collection services. So currently we are providing this service to our commercial customers as part of our compliance with 1826. For residential, we are currently operating under our one big bin concept. And I'm actually here tonight to receive formal direction from council on whether we should continue with the one big bin program or look into exploring a 3-cart system. So as you can see here in the traditional 3-cart system, you would have a black container, which would go, everything in that would be trash, go directly to the landfill. And in the green container, they would put the yard clippings, green waste, and in the 3-container system, food waste would also go in that container. In the blue container is your traditional recyclables, your paper, plastic, bottles, aluminum, cardboard. In the current model that we have with the one big bin, everything goes in the black container, your recyclables, your food waste, your trash. And the only thing that would go in the green container is the yard waste, the yard clippings. And one thing to note as part of the regulation is we're all moving toward a standard color. So that will be forthcoming. It's required by January 1st, 2036. So we'll all have black cans, gray cans for trash, green for yard waste, and blue will be recyclable. And there is labeling requirements as well. But one of the cool things about our program, the One Big Bin, is we have a materials recovery facility. So everything shows up in the trash container and ends right here. And as you can see, it's mixed with your recyclables, cardboard, and trash. And I know a lot of new people coming to the area, they wonder, how does this get recycled? Where does it go? Look at how neat this next picture shows. They can take that material and they can sort it with the machinery. We can pull out the glass, the cardboard, and the plastics. We can also achieve a better diversion rate, more marketable material, and it's very efficient and we recover so much. But in order to comply with SB 1383 and pull out that food waste, we are going to have to upgrade to a high diversion organic waste facility. So the Western Placer Waste Management Authority, also known as the WATMA, they selected FCC Environmental Services, who will be our new operator starting this July. And they will be making these facility upgrades to be able to do all of that and meet these requirements. So they'll be adding screens, magnets, artificial intelligence, robotics, and including hand sorters. And they are committed to meeting these diversion requirements, and it's in their contract. And so another item on the agenda this evening is the flow commitment. And the flow commitment is our agreement to send our solid waste, all of our solid waste, to the WATMA facility. And this will allow them to assure that we will send their loads and they can do the proper financing to build this facility. And so they're trying to gather flow commitment agreements from each of the member agencies, and that will show that we will be able to pay this loan back. And so directly it involves the member agencies because whoever is on board or not on board will affect the municipal solid waste tipping fee. So in item 8L, we are requesting that authorization from council to authorize the city manager to further negotiate and execute that agreement on behalf of the city. So far, we know that the county adopted their flow commitment agreement today, and Rockland has theirs coming up. And we are here tonight, and then Roseville will be forthcoming as well. But if everybody stays on board and puts in their flow commitments, we would be staying at the same tipping rate fee as we are today, which is 88 a ton. If someone were to pull out, if Roseville were to pull out, it could go up as high to 103 a ton. And if there's any other changes, it could be somewhere in between. But that is forthcoming. It will happen pretty quickly, but we're asking for your authority to give that to the city manager to further negotiate and execute on behalf of the city. And so I thought this was pretty cool to share. This is a video taken from the FCC MRF in Texas, and here they're using robotics. And so robotics is one of the new technologies that they're going to be bringing to our high diversion facility, and we will be able to pull more items out of the Dirty MRF concept, or even with the 3-cart. So it's pretty cool. And not everybody gets to see robots in action. It's pretty neat. So again, I'll be looking at the end of the presentation to receive city council direction on whether or not to continue with the current one big bin concept or exploring the 3-cart. And so another requirement of SB 1383 is an establishment of an edible food recovery program. So this part of the regulation is aimed to reduce food waste and address food insecurity. CalRecycle has mandated the recovery of at least 20% of currently disposed surplus food by 2025. And jurisdictions are responsible to implement an edible food recovery program. This will include identifying our top tier food generators and assessing their capacity and quantity of eligible surplus food, and also identifying food service organizations, so those who generate and those who can take it, and then also putting an agreement together to formalize and providing inspections, reporting, education, and outreach on that program. So the city is going to partner with the Placer County Department of Health and Human Services to provide this service for the city. We are currently in the process of working on an MOU. And tier 1 generators have to comply with this program right now. And in 2024, we will take on tier 2 food generators. The next requirement for SB 1383 is procurement. So starting this year, each jurisdiction will have an annual procurement target, which is the quantity of recovered organic waste products that a jurisdiction is required to procure annually. Lincoln's target, since we're about 50,000 in population, is roughly 4,000 tons. This is a 5-year target, and then will be reevaluated in another 5 years. And so with this number, we can use a mixture of any options of compost, mulch, biomass-derived electricity, or renewable gas from anaerobic digestion. So a couple of items that Lincoln has for compliance are purchasing mulch, looking at renewable energy credits from Pioneer and PG&E, and also thinking about local partnerships, regional collaboration on how we can meet this requirement together. We also applied for a grant, and we're going to use some grant money towards meeting compliance for procurement. We also will be updating our purchasing policy to require the procurement of recycled content paper when available at the same price or less. And then 2 other items that are requirements of SB 1383 are outreach and capacity planning. So once we have confirmation from council on whether we're going with the one big bin or the 3-cart program, we will start working on direct outreach to our customers, letting them know how we are in compliance with 1383. So we'll do mailers, e-bulletins, social media, website, use whatever we have to communicate that. We're also working with the county on capacity planning for organics and edible food. And last slide, we got through, is we have to provide inspection and enforcement requirements. So tonight also on the agenda is a public hearing. We're going to adopt an ordinance, and that ordinance will codify all of the requirements of 1383. So everything from collection, residential collection, being added for for organics, edible food, and enforcement are all going to be in these codifications. So that will be in the ordinance. And as far as reviews, route reviews, we won't, depending on how council goes, if we stick with the one big bin concept, there shouldn't be much for the residential side. We won't have to monitor what's in the garbage container since everything's mixed together. So it would be easier. And we're also in communication with CalRecycle to see how the reporting and monitoring what would it look like? Because the model is really the 3-cart for the state, but we're different. And so we are working with them very closely, and they've been very supportive. We appreciate that. So with that, that includes my presentation. I'll take any questions if you have any. And then also I'd like to hear your direction.
Great, thank you for that. That was great. Go ahead.
Mayor, if I could just editorialize one more thing to add on. So one of the things that's been brought up a lot, first of all, this is one of the most expensive and wide-ranging unfunded mandates that has been handed down from Sacramento in a really long time. I don't know if it's the most expensive, but it's got to be up there.
Thank you. You saved me from having to say it.
Yeah, and I just can't help it. I have to. But yeah, you really can't handle more. But so what I want to say is we get a really common question from people about this in the community, which is, why don't we just go to a 3-cart system? They have it in the Bay Area. They have it in LA. They have it in a lot of areas. And there's a really important reason why. I'm going to be honest for a moment about my personal life, which is that when I get handed a trash bag by my wife, I don't go digging through it to make sure that the chicken bones are pulled out and the diapers are in one area. I just throw it into the trash can. And I think that that's fairly normal for a lot of folks. And when you go to a 3-cart system, you're really depending on everybody to comply. And the way the bill is written, it's going to be monitored, and we're going to have, and for every single violation of accidentally putting a can in one can versus another, we potentially are on the hook for some fines down the road. So, and then, certainly there's the other component, which is this concept of enforcement on your citizenry. There are some communities that are hiring what they call trash cops, which go around and literally look through people's trash to make sure they're putting things in the right. And so for all of those reasons, but most importantly, it's simply more expensive, the 3-cart system, and especially for Lincoln, because it means we have to hire a third more drivers and buy not even a third more trucks, probably almost twice as many trucks because of how our routes work. And we are not guaranteed that it's a more effective process. So for all of those reasons, I just think it's really important to kind of acknowledge that what we're doing for our citizens is creating a system for them where they don't have to think about it. They just continue to live their life as they always did, and the technology deals with it on the back end. So for what it's worth.
Yep, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to ask first question and then I'll go down here. So currently we have trash and green waste. So the one big bin would just be all green waste would go in that.
One big bin right now. It's just trash.
Yeah, okay, but we would still have, that's what I'm asking, that we would have, still have a green waste separate
Correct.
from the way, okay, I just wanted,
Yeah.
that's, okay, that's. what I
Good
thought.
question, though. Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
And there are some houses that don't have a green waste container because they don't have enough yardscape.
Right.
And they're allowed to put their minimal amount of green
In the
waste
trash.
into the trash
Okay.
can.
yeah, awesome. Thank you for that clarification.
So what you're saying is if I have the yard waste and I have the green can. So if we went to the three cans, then I'd have 4.
You'd have
You'd have 3.
Or you would add one more for recyclables.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
but then you'd have,
And your organics.
bin.
you'd get a blue bin. Yeah,
Okay.
okay, gotcha. Okay, Paul, do you have questions?
I guess I do have questions and comments, actually. So what is our current recovery rate with the existing MRF?
A great question. I do have Eric with me this evening from the Western Placer Waste Management Authority.
Like the way I did that, Eric?
Yeah.
So let me just say this, when I left the board, when I left the chairmanship, it was above 75% recovery of the waste stream. Where are we now?
So first, let me introduce myself, Eric Otto. I'm the program manager with the Western Placer Waste Management Authority, and thanks for the tee up for the question. So as a region, you're right. When you left the board, the region as a whole, the way that they reported to Cal Recycle is right about 75%. It has dropped off. It's probably in the high 60s at this point right now. Now, that's a reflection of a number of things, not the least of which is the policies put in place by China a number of years ago that really restricted the amount of material that they're willing to import in overseas. And so right now, I wish I could report that things were fantastic at the site. Councilmember Carlos Kent knows that we experienced a really significant fire back on Veterans Day. So right now, the facility is kind of hobbling along, but we're still able to ensure that the jurisdictions are complying with AB 939 mandates. So those are the ones where each jurisdiction needs to meet 50%. But with the new program that we have lined up with FCC Environmental, we're going to really knock it out of the park. They are committed to complying with the 75% diversion of organics from the mixed waste stream. So that's your black can. And so that meets the targets of 1383. In addition to that, the overall site diversion should reach close to 80%, which we've never even come close to that. It will nearly double the amount of material that we're keeping out of the landfill, extending that asset, and really truly mining the waste stream the way that we've always envisioned.
And you may not be able to answer this, but I think you can. With a 3-bin system, what is the probability of achieving that level of recovery? You're going to be reliant upon individuals to separate all that out
Right.
and
Well,
trust that they've done so.
And I think that that's the important point, is that once you have a 3-bin system, it's not that you're just relying on the individual to sort, you're mandating it. With the One Big Bin program, there's still opportunities to recycle if one chooses to. It's just that you're not obligated to. That's a big difference. So running some preliminary numbers for other jurisdictions with the model that if the black bin were to go straight to the landfill with no additional processing, and that you would take the blue bin into the MRF process and you still have your green bin, roughly half the diversion rate that we anticipate achieving under the One Big Bin system.
And that's really important. And
It is.
that's,
And if you have the 3 bins, walk me through what that looks like for other jurisdictions that have it, right? Do you still have to go through all of that and make sure that what's in each bin complies to what's supposed to be in each bin? So is it just like an extra step on the front end, or are you just like, hey, sight unseen, I'm just going to trust that you did it, even though you have no reason to care because it's not your fine?
No, it's a fantastic question, because I think the argument comes down to, my personal opinion, what I've seen in the past, and I think what we're hearing this evening, is that if a jurisdiction goes to a 3-bin system, particularly after having a 1 big bin system, but regardless of that, even if they're in a 3-bin system, there will be organics in that black bin. There will be recyclables in that black bin. There will likely be household hazardous waste in that black bin.
There'll be batteries for sure. There's kids in
Exactly.
a house.
And all those things will go to the landfill.
Tell me I'm wrong.
It will fill up the landfill quicker. It will increase the risk, and it won't meet the state's objectives to reducing methane, which is really the heart of 1383. Just anecdotally, a number of years ago, we were dealing with aerosol cans and trying to figure out how to manage those in the waste stream, which are considered a household hazardous waste. And we're pulling them out. And we started talking with some of our other neighboring jurisdictions. And we said, how do you manage them? And they said, we don't have a problem. That was code for, we don't look at it.
Right.
It goes in the black bin, it goes in the landfill. We
Right.
don't have a problem. That's not our philosophy.
so, and if any of you have been out to the MRF and seen the work they do, you mentioned batteries. There's a magnet that swings back and forth across the belt, picking up magnets, bullets, virtually anything of below a certain weight that it can handle, pulls it right out. There's an area with tin cans is the wrong word, aluminum cans, I guess these days, that has a gap in that. One side is negative, one side is positive. And as that belt of waste comes down, the cans literally leap over the hole. Everything else drops into the hole. So to watch them mine this waste stream, as if even using mining technology, the shaker table is from gold mining, is fascinating to watch. And the notion that we can increase that technology and get a much greater recovery rate than is otherwise possible is really exciting in the world of waste recovery. But so I'm going to touch on 2 other things, both of which I think bother me a little bit. That the food recovery mandates, that bothers me on this side of it, in that that's a business's or an individual's private property. And now the government is going to require that if that food is edible, they give it or somehow provide it to another entity. That if they willingly want to do that, I have no issue with that whatsoever, but being forced to do so concerns me a little bit. We're not going to be able to do anything about that. On the procurement side, I just want to be sure that I understand what we're saying there. You mentioned the Chinese dropping off on the amount of recovered materials they're willing to buy, and that diminished the marketplace and made it much more difficult to have those high recovery rates. So I read this as kind of a stopgap for that, which is turning around and saying to our local jurisdictions, you must somehow purchase.
And that's exactly it. And it's unfortunate because I will be the first one to say that whenever given the chance, I champion that we need to establish stronger markets. That really is the key to a successful operation, is having an entity on the back end that wants to purchase these products. What the state heard is, all right, we're going to force the jurisdictions to buy these products, whether or not they need them.
Right.
Instead of actually fostering stronger markets, it's a forced market.
And given the fact that we participate in the JPA, why would we even have to purchase the materials that have been recovered using our dollars? Shouldn't that just be distributed throughout our communities if the intent is to recover it and somehow make it useful rather than actually procuring or purchasing?
That would be the reasonable solution. Yes. So we are working with Count Recycle though. I'm sorry?
Given our model, is there a way to comply with that regulation without requiring actual local dollars?
We're working with Cal Recycle to work through that issue. I think, again, I've heard the term tonight a couple of times, devil's in the details. And I think that some of these things were put into place without really talking with the folks that are going to be impacted by it.
Always. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I think there's opportunities to resolve that issue. I've been speaking with representatives from other agencies, and they've come up with a couple of novel ideas that I think are worth exploring, because, you know, Lincoln's not the only one in this position that would be obligated to purchase more material than they could really use.
Right.
But that doesn't really foster a strong market.
No, an artificial market, in fact. So then I guess the last of that was you're looking for direction from me, the One Big Ben, absolutely stay with it. And the other direction you needed was,
Committing our trash to WATMA.
oh, without question, yes.
So I had a question about that too, about the flow commitment. If a jurisdiction pulled out of that, where would they go? Make their own?
Wheatland.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mostly Roosevelt's had they've been looking around at different options. Wheatland's been the nearest one.
Which would double the drive time of their drivers, causing their
Yes.
cost to go up.
Adding another cart.
But my main concern with that was, would it be prohibitive? Can we still afford the contract? And it looks like we can, right?
Yeah, the $106 is if they're not in.
Right? 103
Right,
if they're not
otherwise
in.
103.
But what is?
Other,
that
it's
look-
88 normal.
But what does 103 look like fully loaded? Like, what is that actual cost to us? Right, what's? the additional-
$103 a ton.
You're looking
Now
for the-
you're
looking
asking
for
at
the
the-
delta?
To the, do you remember the cost per can, average cost per can for the $106 over the 88?
Right. If I recall correctly, and we tried to model this for our board to give some sense of what these rate increases could mean to a typical residential customer,
Yeah, that's
typical
what my
96
question is.
gallon
What does that look
cart.
like? What does it mean?
I believe, if memory serves, going from 88 to 103 would be in the range of $2.75 to $3.25 a month. So, you know, roughly $3 a month is kind of a reasonable.
So it
talking
is a
point.
big jump, but it also is something most people would be able to absorb without paying.
Okay.
It's not as shocking as the idea of going, you know, the numbers of 88 to 103. That seems like a much more
Well, that's what
shocking
I meant,
jump.
Steve.
But
Right.
what that could mean to a typical residential customer doesn't seem like it would be overly burdensome.
Right.
But it is important to understand that what that delta could be to a business customer could be more significant. And obviously they pass that back onto the residential customer. So it is cumulative.
So the flip side of that too is if Roseville were to pull out, our landfill would have additional capacity
It would have
for,
a lot longer.
it would last a heck of a lot longer. So-
It would indeed. There has been discussion of how would the agency manage it if one or more of its partners were to leave. And there is discussion about looking for other sources of tonnage or restructuring how the operation works. Really, we're better off together. It's worked really well for the last 40 years and had a very stable, productive operation. And that's certainly our goal, is to keep it that way. But we understand that if one or more partners opts to leave, we still need to figure out how to manage our waste. And to do so with local control and local foresight, we really believe is in all of our best interest.
Do you have another comment or question, Dan, or?
Oh, I think obviously the direction ought to be the one big bin. I was actually very surprised when you consider the magnitude of the procurement for the new MRF. It's a high performance, high density MRF, that it only that having one of the partners drop out didn't increase the cost for the rest of us a heck of a lot more. So it didn't bother me as much as it did for a while. I do have a 1383 question. The 20% of edible food. That was from 2017 tonnage, right? We've already in Placer County done a huge amount of edible food through Placer Food, through all of our nonprofits. But we don't get any credit for that?
I know that requirement's by 2025.
But what's it 20% from what?
Right.
From what?
What's the comparison, right? Since we've already been good actors,
Right.
do we get some sort of credit for that? Or are we now having to reduce even further from someone else who was just like, forget it, I don't care?
No.
That's what you're asking though, right, Dan?
And
Right.
Sean's answer was no, we don't. get
In other
credit.
words,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
in other words, being a good guy
You don't
doesn't
get
work.
credit.
Right.
Okay.
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 And that
Bill.
was the only, just as one big bin was really,
And
we got the flow control, but we do that separately.
Yeah,
Right.
and that'll be on the consent calendar.
I'll go with the one big bin.
Okay.
All right, for me, 100% one big bin. I think that goes back to that comment of, good intentions versus good ideas. And the 3 bins sounds like a good intended bad idea.
No, it sounds like torture to me.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, for real though, like just think about your average household in particularly like in like the stage that like Sean's in, right? His kids are little, everyone's moving parts. There's a whole lot of different types of trash. Like you do not have time to like, I even tried it, right? And then like you look at the bottom and there's a little recycling. You can't tell, is it recyclable or is it a different type of triangle? You need like a freaking matrix to like figure out like which goes where. Whereas like this, I feel like the one big bin is really innovative. I think that it's very efficient. I think the robots are very cool. I'd like to see that. But also, at the end of the day, we are being held accountable. It's the city that's going to be held accountable and we will be fined, right? And so we have the choice then of, are we going to go be food cops and fine our residents because they're not,
It's
putting the leftover dinner in like a different bin from their, plastic bottle? Or are we going to just take accountability for it and realize that we already have a system that works and we can control for all of that and not put batteries in our landfill, which is a horrible thing to do. And I will acknowledge that my trash has many times had batteries in it because I have children and they're sneaky. I've found them.
And
They're working batteries. Even. They just
the
run.
city isn't in, if I understand how it all works, the city is with the one big bin and WAPMA, the city is not in the monitoring
No,
or enforcement
it's on them.
thing.
It's on you.
That's-
as a board member.
Or measuring.
Right.
We get We get a form back from WAPA every month, as you mentioned that.
We've opted into a system and it's on
Right.
them and we're enabling
So
that
there's
efficiency
just
to happen.
No,
I will just note, having spent a good portion of my day-to-day, as Paul knows, monitoring the environmental toxic materials committee at the Capitol, there's a whole lot of interest, continued interest in continuing to make it difficult to put things in landfills. Like, this concept is not going to get easier. It's not going to go away. Compliance is, if anything, going to get more restrictive, more burdensome, so that we're already involved in something that makes us able to meet our targets. I don't know why we would do anything else.
So I would agree. You have your direction for one big bin. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank
Yes.
you all.
Oh,
And
thank-
staying with WAPA.
And yeah, well,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
on consent anyway, but yes, for sure.
So
Thank you,
Eric-
Angela.
Eric, I'm not going to pass up the opportunity to mention plasma incineration again. I know California isn't going to allow it, but 90% of the waste stream is diverted by using that. So what goes into the landfill is only 10%.
Right. And I think that that's really what the authority is. It's aligning itself to be able to do with its EIR that was out on the street, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that back in the summer to certify it. And
California allow that?
I'm sorry,
California, do we allow that?
not yet,
I
but I
was gonna
think
say,
it's,
could look at
I
that,
honestly
yes,
think it's
yeah.
a matter of time. I think it's going to be baby steps. There's a lot of special interest groups that are opposed to it. But from my perspective is that there's certain things that we can figure out how to pull out of the waste stream and market. And there's certain things that maybe we can't, but yet it still has energy potential. Let's harvest that energy. Let's squeeze every last little bit out of it. So it does go in the landfill. It's just inert slag.
Right. So do you want to mention Energy 2001? I presume they're still up and going.
They are still up and running. And so even when things go into the landfill and produce methane, we're still realizing value. We have an entity that's been working with us on site almost 25 years, I believe, that takes that landfill gas as we pull it out of the waste stream, out of the landfill, and converts it into energy and puts it back into the grid. So even after when you put something in the landfill and the state is making it out to be the bugaboo that once it's in the landfill, then it's just nothing but a danger to everyone, we're still realizing value from that. It's not perfect. I'll give it that. It's not perfect, but we're moving towards a better system, always improving.
Thanks for all you do out
Yeah,
there.
thank you, Eric, very much. And Angela, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. All right.
Public?
Huh?
Public?
Go back to.
Well, that's up to, oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. Do we have any public comment on this item? Yep. I was like so ready to move on to the next item. Is there anybody in the council chambers that would like to comment on this item? Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Anybody on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
No, okay.
Nobody wants to talk
All right,
trash?
that's all right. Okay. All right. Jen, you are up. So our Chief Innovation and Technology Officer, Jennifer Brown, will be giving a presentation on the city's new website. Very excited for this.
And Mayor, Jen wanted me to let you know before she gets started that this will be about a 3-hour presentation.
Yeah.
So strap in.
I can promise you not.
Okay, so good evening, Mayor, Council. I just wanted to give a brief overview on the project, just because it's consumed over the last year of my life, and it was a really big team effort, and I just want people to understand all that goes into actual redesign of a new website.
It looks so good, by the way.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, and you deserve to have your moment to present, so.
So the original goals of the website were, we wanted it to be user-friendly. That is a very generic term, but people use the website that are all different spectrum of, what they can and can't do online. And so as a city, we wanted to be able to pick up all those different types of people. The other thing was very important was that we need to maintain it. We don't have professional web designers on staff. It's maintained by staff. And so it needed to have functionality that anyone could go in and edit and change content on the website. We wanted to have the ease of navigation, like before on our website, which I'll show you. You had to know what you were looking for belonged to which department. And so that was kind of, no, people might not know that business licenses is in finance. And so the ease of navigation was something that was a big deal. The other thing was ADA accessibility. There's things that laws that we need to meet and things that we need to do to make this accessible for everyone. Our previous website didn't have any tools or the ability to do that. Department flexibility was a really big deal because we're not a one size fits all. We have a whole slew of things that we offer here at the city, and what library wants to display to the public is very different from what City Hall wants to display to the public. Also, many of our users are on mobile, and so it needs to be able to be useful on the phone. And then we do things very manually here. And so we needed to add functionality to get less phone calls, allow people to pay online, do things that people can do without having to make those extra steps to get to someone to get their problem solved. This is the team. This is all the departments and all the little individual divisions within the departments, and every piece that we touched. And we had a representative from each one of these departments that was in our weekly meetings, involved in the design choices and everything. And it was a really big team effort. This is just a really quick timeline. I just wanted to give you an idea of what goes into redesigning a website. So in February, we started writing what we wanted. We got over 20 vendors. It took a long time to go through all those vendors and actually pick one. And then we took it to council and we did our kickoff. One of the first things that we did was the sitemap approval. And this was I thought this was a very innovative way by our vendor to come up with how people browse things and find things on the website. And it was recorded, they call it a tree jack, where they said, find how to pay your utility bill. And then they would track how people actually went through the website to find things. And then they would move the menus around to make it so that it was most efficient. So we had over 400 pages of content to write. So we couldn't take our existing website and import it in. We actually started from scratch and rewrote all the content for the website. And it's not just writing content. You have to learn how to write for the web. So we had training on that. You have to write to an 8th grade level, not because people read at an 8th grade level, but because people's attention is like, I just want to know these things. So it needs to be short and succinct. It can't be elaborate like you're telling a story. And then we did the design approval in September. So from August to December, we wrote content and then we uploaded it. This was really hard for a lot of people, including me, to comprehend because you're just writing content. It's not pretty. It's just what people are reading. Then starting in December, we took all that content and we designed it. We took all of the pieces that we made in the design approval and we made it pretty and usable. Then we did our user acceptance testing. So we tried to break it. And then we ran all of our reports and did all of our final review and made sure that, all the content in there was good. Links weren't broken, but we still have some of those. So then in March, we did pre-go live. And this was just the day before. It was mostly done by the vendor. And then on 3/2, we went live. And it's really exciting to turn it over and then just see the new site appear. So that was pretty exciting. And so the next thing I want to show you is, so here's a before of what our website looked like on the homepage. I refer to this as like a mega menu, like on a cell phone, this was sub inside sub inside sub. So it was really hard to get into anything. And then here's an after. So some of the features that changed is like the quick links are there available to you, as well as the news. The menus are organized by more of how people who may use the website think on how they want to get around to things. And then you can see we have 3 major landing pages. So public safety, the library, and Parks and Rec. And I call those landing pages because we wanted it to have a cohesive look with the city, but also have its own kind of style. And so this would be so that they can offer the services better to the residents. This was a before and after of mobile. So you can see the jump to sub page there before. It would be, you'd have to jump to get to things. And now this is more, we're more in the world of scrolling. So people like to scroll now. And so things are just pages are very long. And then you just click on a big link button or a picture. This is a good example of landing page and how it changed. So you can see Parks and Rec now has, people looking for recreation programs. They can easily go to youth. They can easily go to adult. It's right there on the main page. The 6 buttons are what they get asked the most. I want to run a facility. It's there. It's easy. When before it would be really hard to find anything of what you were looking for. Same with library. Library was going along more of lines of the scroll. They were trying to make the big buttons of how people use their site. And now it's just, I think it's pretty. So this was a huge team effort, but there are 3 individuals that I really want to recognize here, not because, everybody contributed, don't get me wrong, but these 3 people went above and beyond what was asked of them to be part of this project. And I wouldn't have been able to complete this project without Catherine, my left arm. And so I just want, to recognize like she was really a big part of making this successful. And then Michelle Scoma, she is in engineering and community development, has lost a lot of resources. She was really she took all their stuff in and did all their stuff. And Anna, she was really wanting to help, and she became the form guru. So she would make everyone's forms. Like, how can I make this so that it's more efficient for you? And so she was doing everyone's forms. And then the recreation team, I put them on here as a group because they had over 80 pages of content to write just themselves. They did a lot of the park stuff as well. And they would have 2-hour meetings after our weekly meeting to go over what needed to be done and how they can make things better. And they were just really involved in the whole thing. And it was nice to have them there. So what's next with the site? Maintaining it. It's a living, breathing document, and it's a lot of work daily. And so maintaining it. And we have created a very small admin team that does the approvals. And so people can still make their edits and edit their content. And then we'll make sure that it still aligns with what we want it to look like so that it doesn't go by the wayside and we get a lot of just random things. We have some external sites that were created because our previous website could not do what needed to be done. So what we want to do is consolidate those external sites and get rid of, the cost and then just bring them into the fold of our existing site. There were pages that we had to leave unpublished because we didn't have staff to help with those pages. Like some examples would be economic development of like specific things. We had to leave them off because the content was so outdated and we didn't have time or staff resources to publish them. So we'll be filling those out. And then an intranet. It's a long overdue internal thing that would be really helpful to staff. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Jen. That was a really great presentation, and I can't even imagine the work that you guys have done. That is so far beyond my wheelhouse, but I just thank you very much. The website is beautiful. I actually was on it today, just kind of flicking around just in preparation for tonight. I mean, I looked at it before, but I was just I was like, and you're right. The old one was really hard to find stuff. And I was like, I'm on the city council, I can't find anything, right? So it's wonderful. I've had a few comments from the public, that it looks great. So thank you guys so much. Can you flip back really quickly? I did have one question on your last slide there.
Which one?
Your last slide, when you were listing things that still needed to be done. I just can't remember what I had a question about. Could you give me an example of an external site that you're trying to consolidate?
Yeah, like organics.
Oh, okay.
There's a Lincoln Stormwater site. Okay. So these were ones that were that we had to do for some legislation or something.
Okay.
And those they were done by a consultant. And we just want to bring them in.
No, that's good. And I would agree with you that it's much better to leave off outdated stuff because it's horrible to have stuff and you look at something that's like, well, that was 5 years ago. So thank you very much. Questions, comments, Paul?
No questions, just a comment. My own experience has been that this is a much more useful site. My measure of that is how often I would go searching for an agenda, sitting at this dais and not be able to find where the doggone thing was. And right now it's incredibly easy. One step, one button, done. So thank you for that.
Since I've gone through, seems like hundreds of web updates and fresh builds, I'm surprised that you were able to do it in the time you did, end up with the product you did. And you've set my sights really high for the new accounting system. That's your next project, right? And, but anyway, you did a great job, all of you.
Thanks.
Maybe you need to take a trip to Disneyland before you start that new accounting system or something.
I don't know. We're starting that right away.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, thank you, Nita. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I have looked at the new website. It's really nice. It's much easier than the old one.
Awesome.
I'll just echo Dan's comments. I once had to lead the rebranding of a small firm's website that had, none of the stuff that we have to deal with at the city. And maybe 40 total pages. And the mapping, the site mapping, the link crossing, all the back end so that it's actually searchable on the web. There's so much that goes into that even if you have a contractor doing it, you have to provide all the information and you have to know I don't even know how you did it. I think that's my point. I'll just stop. I don't know how you accomplished what you did in such a short amount of time. I think that it's amazing. And I loved that you used the recreation site as a comparison, because I used to always try to sign my kids up for city recreation programs. And I finally just stopped because I could never figure out how to get to the actual one I wanted. And then once I finally got there, somehow it wasn't where you actually paid for it. And then once I paid for it, once I didn't actually end up participating because I could never find what I'd done again. It was horrible. So thank you for fixing it. Yeah, it was a nightmare.
And honestly, the words "thank you" is so hollow. It's this was such a huge job. We're just so appreciative.
I am going to say when you called out Catherine,
I
it
was
was
not-
not a surprise at all, because I somehow feel like you're czar of organization combined with your like unique talents, like you guys could probably take over the world.
Right. Pinky in the brain. Okay.
Right. Can I ask one more thing?
Yes.
Add one more thing. So a lot of the photos, I just wanted to say, they came from Ron Nabby. He was a big contributor to the photos. And then the Love Lincoln Photo Challenge that we did during the pandemic. We also used a lot of that stuff. So
I
it's
love
all like
that.
local people. So that's really, really
That's
cool.
very cool. That's wonderful. Right. Thank you guys so much. Any public comments? Mr. Chapman, I know you did. Go ahead. Yes, and you can stay there a few questions.
Thank you very much, Mayor, council members, and city staff, and those hanging in there with the rest of us. I've looked at the website, really dug into it all of this last week. I was looking forward to this presentation because, and I do know you guys have done an incredible amount of job with what you have. Having said that, when I get done with what I'm saying, I'll offer my services free of charge to help them on what I'm going to share with you. When I went on to the website, one of the pivoting points in my life, unfortunately, is ADA issues. And so I went on to the website and I looked up ADA. There wasn't any. Zero. So I typed it in. ADA evaluation plan popped up. Okay, now I know what to do in order to get in there. But plugged onto it. This is what I got. And that's a lot of data, just this, literally. So I'm not putting you and your team down because it's a lot of work. And I'm certainly willing to make it work. That's the whole point. But having that site up there, it doesn't even state who the ADA coordinator is. And here's the awesome fact, and it's unfortunate, but it's absolutely true. 80% of people who were either born with a disability or become and have a disability do not know what their civil rights are. Most people know when you ask them, what's your rights as a disabled? Oh, I know that if I fill out a form and my doctor signs it and I turn it into DMV, I can park in the blue place. That's what they know. I made a short list of who will tell you that you have your rights. All of these don't. Doctors, nurses, physical rehab, wheelchair companies, wheelchair and car manufacturers, employers, home care workers, DMV, Social Security Department. No one hands you a guide, not even your doctor, and said, you know, this is where you're at from here on, but here's your rights. It took me and two other individuals 12 years in order to go through all of that. And that's why I am such a thorn in everyone's side, because I want this town to be as accessible as I've helped to make in other places. It's a showcase that you could put on the website. You can showcase and say, Lincoln is one of the most accessible places there is. People don't know where to go to for a curbside. How do you turn that in? I went to the complaint form. I got this. And again, what's difficult about this is most people, all they're going to know is, I just need to push in ADA and the ADA coordinator, and then the path goes from there. And I'm more than willing to help you make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman.
You're welcome.
I'm guessing that this is one of the areas that we are still working on.
Yeah, Mayor,
Yeah.
just real quick, while Mr. Chapman was talking, I was searching exactly his search terms, and then it was correct. It was coming up page unfound. I thought that's strange. So I typed in another completely unrelated search term, exact same thing. So it's an architectural problem, not a access problem.
And it's also, so we're at the liberty of Google to re-index our website. So if the search terms, they're gonna come, and what it is it's based on page views, and that's how quickly they'll come. It can take up to 6 months for Google to re-index our entire site. So
that is an issue that when there's a big splash screen that comes up that says that the search might not work, which I think people probably X out of because they don't want to read it.
So I think what you're saying is the content is there.
The
It's just
content,
not
it's
accessible
not
at the moment.
So that was when I was
currently.
saying, I don't even know how she did it. Like when you do it, you have to like all the the SEO terms, right, that make you searchable on the back end. You have to like manually input all of that. And then like she said, based on like hits and content, they basically send like these little I don't know, digital spiders through like bots through your content. And then it gets like ordered based on how much it's frequented, and you have to earn it. And so it's going to take a while for us to pop up. And I don't know that there's any way around that unless
Some pages we can do like short URLs, you know, where something you would search and you would attach a
So it'll
term.
be-
So it'd be things like that, but you can't come up with everything that anyone's ever going to search for. So, you know, that's something that we can, as they come in, we can add them.
try and figure out a way to like link it into a more commonly searchable term so that it comes up shorter and faster.
And as far as I just also want to speak to one more thing about cybersecurity. We don't have names of staff on the site, so it would be the ADA coordinator is who you would contact, and you would send an email through a form because that's the easiest way for people to do social engineering. So the only people that actually have their names is like the chief, city manager.
It's
you.
highly visible
Mhm.
public
Yes.
figures.
So, so is there, do we have an ADA coordinator still?
We're required to by law.
Yeah, I know. Well, the one we
We
had
better.
is not here anymore. I don't know who it is. Oh, okay. So is there a form on there to send that person an email, or is that something we have to add?
I'll double check and see
Okay.
if it's a contact in the contact, as there be a contact us, and you can look and make sure if that one was left off, I will add it.
Okay.
But for sure, that would be how you would search it, but it won't give you an actual name.
Right, right. Okay, thank you. Any other comments in the chambers? Okay, any on Zoom? No? Okay, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate all that. Okay, now we are on item number 7.
This may be the latest we've ever gotten to public comment.
I know, I feel really bad about it. Yeah, it does sometimes. Well, we're used to having shorter meetings, Lucy, but, okay. So, these are non-agendized items. And so the first, speaker card I have is for Trevor Jameson. And thank you so much for your patience.
Mayor Andriotta, council members, Trevor Jameson, president of Local 522 Sacramento area firefighters. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. I'd wait all night to talk to you about this. I'm here to offer another perspective. Your Lincoln firefighters are members of Local 522. We're about 1,600 members strong. We have members in Placer County, Sacramento County, and Yolo County. Coming up, you're going to have the opportunity to make a vote and how to spend some money. Some ARPA money and to make the firefighters here in Lincoln represent what professional firefighters are today. And that is a fully staffed, all-risk fire department. They are the only fire department in all of 522 that does not respond with 3-person engine crews. The men and women of Local 522 are expected to respond in a very professional manner from all types of incidents, whether it be a fire incident, a medical incident, or any number of risks. The bottom line and the opportunity you have is to assist the members here with providing a better service to your constituency. When they arrive on scene with 3 members at a fire or even a medical aid, it will provide a higher level of service to the people that you are tasked with representing. I've heard a lot about accountability tonight, and accountability is something that all elected officials are subject to. I'm subject to that to my membership as well, and to represent them in a way that gives another perspective to maybe people that don't always get that. But they have been doing an amazing job in here in Lincoln for a really long time. A professional service with 2 people on an engine company, 6 firefighters a day on duty, in a city that's now 50,000. Lincoln's not a small town anymore. It's a growing city with a bright future. There's tens of thousands of people who go through this city on the freeways, come here for work. And I think as members of this council, you are charged with providing the services that your constituency expects. And I think stopping short of the 3-person at a minimum of 9 more firefighters to your citizens for service is a disservice. The last thing I think when you have this opportunity that I'd want to face would be if they responded to a house fire and there was somebody trapped and it was only 2 members. The risk to the public and the crew on that scene is immense. And I know that there's been a lot of great discussion. Evan Faddis, who represents the Lincoln firefighters, has done an amazing job. All the Lincoln firefighters have done a great job. And my hope to be here tonight was, I know this is coming up, was to make that appeal, make another viewpoint from outside of the area that you make the right decision and you staff all the engines in Lincoln with 3 firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. I really appreciate that. Next card is Mia Guzman, but did she left? Okay, sorry, Mia. Okay, anybody else in the chambers? Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Once again, Byron Chapman, 12 Bridges area. Mayor and council members and city staff. I was going to share this information at the last council meeting, however, I didn't get here in time. And again, I heard the last gentleman speak. He talks about accountability, and that's basically what I'm going to cover. For almost 8.5, almost 9 months, I had turned in a form regarding accessibility issue a half a block from City Hall. The good news is that once I ended up making that known dozens of times, finally that happened. But then I started to ask myself, how did that happen? And by the way, the good news for anybody that's listening in here is that sidewalk has been repaired, and I truly appreciate that. However, even something like that, and the issue really wasn't getting that done. The issue that I bring to you tonight really is what should have happened in order to block that sidewalk off until the city could get to it. And that seemed to be a mountain that the previous city manager, I've talked to the council about this many times, should not have happened. Under the ADA, it specifically states that it's, it's all for one and one for all. It should be that way. So I got to thinking, I wonder how that happened. How did that finally get done? Was it a city ordinance passed and then enforced? Was there a grant of funds that received from the state or the federal government? Did the council hold a special meeting to put a proclamation together to have it passed? Was there a special election of funds? The community came together and made it happen? Did someone get hurt at that location and finally had to close it down to everyone? Then I asked myself, maybe I'm not asking the right question. The question is, who prevented it from being closed off to everyone and not just the mobility impaired for approximately 8.5 months? So with that, I'm like, what do I do now? I find I'm no spring chicken, but I do have to say this with all sincerity. When I was younger, when somebody said, I'm sorry about doing something, it truly meant something. It seems like I'm sorry is the go-to response when a person says that they will do what they said they will do, and then they don't. I hear so often it's like it's not even worth, it's watered down. If everyone did their job as they said they would, and then follow to that commitment, you would never have to say you're sorry. I'll wrap this up. The bottom line to all of this, instead of someone finding out and saying, I'm sorry all the time, maybe you should add 2 sentences to that. One should be, I'm really sorry and I'm terrible at my job and I should be replaced. Or I'm sorry, But you just weren't that important enough for me to get back to you when I said that you would, and you didn't. So from that standpoint, I would hope that the I sorries get less. And I think people, when they commit to something, whether it's in writing or in voice, I would hope that it would be handled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. We appreciate your comments. Okay, any other comments on Zoom?
Yes. Mayor Albert Schreiber, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening again, Albert Shiver. First, I'd like to welcome the new city manager. I know he's been on the job a while, but figured I'd give him a break, let him get his feet on the ground first. So with that said, I wish him luck. And at the last regular council meeting, Mr. Joyner asked what the status of Village 5 was. And so the city manager gave a brief overview that everything was going good and it'd be like 3 months and it'd probably be getting annexed. What was frustrating about that response was there was no mention of the 2 lawsuits that have been going on against Village 5, one for over 4 years and one for almost 4 years now. And while I realize you can't talk about the lawsuits, somebody could have brought up that they actually exist and what the status is. So, I'm hoping the new city manager just didn't know about that for some reason, and he's not already drinking the Kool-Aid. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Okay, no other comment? All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you guys for hanging in there. Really appreciate it. So it's kind of an odd meeting tonight. All right, let's go to item 8, consent. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine business and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the city council or resident requests a specific item be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the remainder of the consent agenda. So do any of my colleagues wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? No, anybody from the public? No? Okay, then may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes. Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskin,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner, Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriana.
Yes. Okay, so we've already done 9A, correct? Okay, 9B.
I thought we did 10A.
Oh, we did 10A. You're right. You're right.
They're related.
Oh, they are. Okay. I got ahead. Oh, see, I got so excited. But it's good to see Angela again. Waive full reading and introduced by title only ordinance 1043B, updating City of Lincoln Municipal Code, Section 8.05, organics, food waste collection.
All right, good evening again, Mayor and City Council. Angela Frost here, and hopefully this should be a short one. This is a public hearing to update Municipal Code Section 8.05 titled Organics Food Waste Collection to include all the requirements of SB 1383. So I know we previously went over them in the presentation, but this new ordinance would codify the added changes for the various categories, including edible food recovery, residential food waste collection, education and outreach, procurement, waivers or exemption for commercial food waste, enforcement, and also the water efficient landscape. We do have in chapter 15.25 related to landscape requirements, and we can come back later and look into making any changes if needed. And then Cal Green standards that are also required in SB 1383, we adopt those each year as part of chapter 15.04.060. So that is what I'm looking for council to have this reading and public hearing this evening to adopt these changes.
All right, thank you. Okay, any questions, comments? Over on this side? No. No? Okay, then we'll go out to the public for a public hearing. Any public comment on this item? No public hearing? Okay, that was easy.
There
Close
is
pub-
on Zoom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forget about Zoom.
Albert Schreiber, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I had my hand up for the consent, but you guys just blew through it. So I just wanted to point out maybe like 2 seconds more for, Gwen I kept raising lower and waving. So anyway, I know we're past it. I can't go back. So for future reference, give us 2 seconds when we're on Zoom, please.
I apologize, Albert. I'm really sorry about that. Okay, any comments about this? Nope, okay. So we'll bring it back to the council. If there's any other comments or questions, then I will accept a motion to, we're passing this, right? Yeah, okay. Sorry. I'm all confused now because I totally skipped past that. I'm sorry. Okay, so accept a motion for 9A, ordinance 1043B.
I move.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes. Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskent, Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai, and Mayor Andriana.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Okay. All right, 9B, waive full reading and introduced by title only ordinance 1044B pursuant to the City of Lincoln Municipal Code Section 2.05.020 C, adopting the Independent Redistricting Commission's determination of the City of Lincoln redistricting map and directing the map be placed on file with the city clerk's office per section 2.05.020B. And Christine Mollenkoff, our city attorney, is going to give this report.
Thank you. So this is a celebratory moment potentially for Ms. Scanlon and I. We've been working with this Independent Redistricting Commission of 11 members of our community since August of last year. It's been a very robust engagement with the public, a lot of social media outreach, a lot of door-to-door posting of flyers, trying to really get the members of our community to participate and communicate with our board, our Independent Redistricting Commission. So as the council likely recalls, when you had the opportunity to make a decision as to whether the council wished to be the body that drew the maps and selected the map, the decision was made to actually go out to an independent redistricting commission. And so the result is what is before you tonight. It is a map that has been drawn in accordance with the California Voting Rights Act and also consistent with the Federal Voting Rights Act, drawing 5 districts in the city of Lincoln. And it is before you tonight for adoption via ordinance. So it's a little unusual because you all were very clear at the beginning that you didn't want to have political fingerprints on this map and that you wanted this commission to feel free to adopt the map that they think best balanced the districts, kept our communities of interest intact. But unfortunately, our outside counsel that was working with Flow Analytics did confirm that it still does need to be adopted by ordinance. So there will be this first reading to adopt the map, and then it will come back to you at the next council meeting for a second reading and adoption. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about this discrete staff report.
Do we have the ability to pull up that
I was
staff
gonna say,
report
can we
with the
pull-
map so that whenever anyone comes back to like watch it, they don't have to also search for the agenda to find the map and it's all in one place so that they can reference it?
It is.
Just to make it convenient.
Button earlier, but we'll have.
Although with our new website, I'm sure it'd be very easy to do both.
Yeah, there's a link on the homepage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
making me type in a different site here.
I'm sorry.
So while we're waiting on them to do that, whenever I look at this map, Clayton is listed as a city directly to our north. It's on this map as well. Doesn't exist. Still winds up on Google Maps everywhere else. The city of Clayton.
Is it a census designated place, perhaps? Because I think those show up.
It sits right on the old Highway 65, actually within our city limits.
It might be a census designated place. Find out. Now I want to know. He's like, I'm on it.
I'm sure there was a town there called Claytown at one point in time, but
Makes sense.
all my years, I've never heard word one about it.
That's interesting. Oh, there it
There
is.
we
Thank
go.
you.
Where's
Just
your-
that way it's just all in one spot because I think that that'd be nice for,
Right there in the blue.
Reference.
Clayton.
Okay.
So that
You can
is
answer
the
this
map
one.
that has been selected
Mhm.
by your independent redistricting commission.
Okay, so I'm just curious, kind of what the discussion, because I didn't pay attention to any of it, right? I didn't listen to any meetings, I didn't, whatever, that's what we were supposed to do. So I have no idea what the thought process was, but, and I understand population groups and all that stuff, but that's a big change from what it was before. What was some of the discussion, if you're at liberty to say, like, you know, like for my district, District 1, like I'm fine with it. I don't really care, but it used to go all along, you know, and it's like totally changed now. So what was the? What was it?
This is largely a population balancing exercise.
That's all, okay.
So it largely had to do with the census tracts, what was reported. I think or anecdotally, I think everyone realizes that the effect on this census, given that it was being taken during COVID, probably had some issues with people actually coming to their front door and responding and participating and fully in the districting process or in the census process. And so that's really what we saw. And frankly, the only issue we really had with our commission, it was interesting where the distinction was between this map and the other map, and where there was a lot of push and pull, is the two orange spaces going from District 4 to District 5 and from District 3 to District 5. That was really, those were communities of interest that there was just a very strong sense from the majority of our commissioners that they should remain or go back to District 5.
Okay, yeah, so the way that the color coding is, so you have the lighter colors, which were the original districts, and then the darker ones on top of them are what's added to that. Moving
Mhm.
into that district, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And you can see it's highlighted there. So there's the
Mhm.
light purple, and then the dark purple is going into the light purple.
That's right, okay,
Or the dark orange is going into the light orange.
okay. All right, questions, comments? Dan?
I have a question, and it has to do with the staff or the item, and that's why are we showing the second map, which was not selected?
what?
I was gonna ask, are they the exact same map or?
No.
Is
They're
it different?
very close.
Very
That's what I
close.
thought, and that's a really good question, Dan. I was gonna ask that too. Why is it on there?
It's probably because that was the last two maps and it was just, we pulled it
Informational
from the.
purposes.
I thought that even when we set it up, didn't we ask for like, no, I don't remember anymore. Did we ask for two or did we just tell them that they get to decide and we just vote on it? I can't remember.
I recall that they get to decide, but I think it may have just
It
been,
was,
Yeah.
it was just a carryover from the staff report for the independent
For the
redistricting
IRC.
commission. So
Okay,
it's
it was
just,
a
that should have
carryover.
just been.
Okay.
Because we, you know, again, there's really no discussion or anything else. We,
We accept it or we don't, yeah.
Yeah.
right. So it is technically a public hearing. So if you wish to open it up,
Question is, do you have any questions?
unless there are any
for us?
questions, more questions.
I don't.
Questions before comments, questions, then public, then comments.
public hearing.
So no questions, but an observation. I find it fascinating that there was a decision to take more of Lincoln Crossing and fold it into District 5, which is 12 Bridges, because the two communities are not the same.
At some point, it became a population
Observation.
balancing
Okay.
exercise. I mean, that's even with the large section going from District 1 to District 2, it was because the
Mhm.
original District 2 had a significant atrophy in
Yeah.
population according to the census.
So maybe it was your wording when you described it that caused me to think that you said to return it to District 5. And so
No, to move it to District 1.
All right, well, so this is a public hearing, open public hearing. Any comments on this? Anybody on Zoom? I'm gonna wait to make sure. No. Okay, close public hearing. All right, if there's no further comments or questions, then I will entertain a motion to accept this map unless somebody has an objection.
moved.
Second,
Hey, roll call, please.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yep.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriata.
Yes.
Can I just make a comment before we move on? I'm just super proud of us for choosing this particular method. And I think that all of us completely stayed out of it. And after watching the mess that the county's system was, I've never been so happy that we chose to do it appropriately and let the public choose their own map.
I had more than a few people want to ask me questions about it, and I literally would have to say,
I
I
have
have
no
no
idea.
idea. I'm paying
Haven't
no
watched a
attention to
single
it
thing.
whatsoever.
First time I saw the map was your staff report.
Yep.
Me
Yep.
too. And I want to thank Gwen and Christine for the Herculean effort that you put in there. You navigated, you trained them, you got it done. And I was a little worried at first if it was not because of you, but because people couldn't meet and different things, but you guys did it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you to the committee members.
Yes, yes. Did a great job.
Commissioners were very dedicated.
Good.
and Very seriously. They
Good.
were a fun bunch to work with.
Good, that's great. Would it be possible for you to email us the names? I would like to send them a thank you note. I don't even know who's all on the commission.
We can do that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I
very much.
didn't
appreciate that.
hear the word fun being used. I
I said
said,
they were a fun group. I didn't necessarily say the meeting was fun.
Okay. That was 9B. Where am I now? Okay. Waive full reading and introduce by title only ordinance 1045B, amending the City of Lincoln Municipal Code Section 2.05.020 related to the term of service of the mayor and vice mayor and the procedure for filling vacancies. And Ms. Malakoff is also going to give us a presentation on this.
Thank you, council. So this is also just a little bit of Muni code cleanup and trying to make things more convenient and concise for not only our council, but also our city clerk. So this has to do with our now by district elections and what the length of term is for our mayor and vice mayor. And the recommendation from staff is to move from a 1-year term to a 2-year term because it will provide consistency with now the cycle of elections and how we go through districts, and districts 3, 4, and 5 are on alternating cycles with 1 and 2. So it just makes that line up. I've also heard from some members of the council that being the mayor, and our mayor can probably agree with this, is that when you take on the job, there's a pretty steep learning curve. And just as you're starting to figure out the job, all of a sudden your term's over and you're terming out. So I think for consistency in the council, this aligns very well with what some of the other sister jurisdictions do in the region. And so then secondly, we are adding a section on filling vacancies. Currently, our municipal code is silent on how we fill vacancies. If someone were to have to resign, pass away, move on to a different position, we, under current general law, would have to go to a special election. Special elections are relatively expensive. And what this proposes is, under the authority granted to you under the government code, the council, if there becomes a vacancy with this in place, can then make an appointment to fill that vacancy and simultaneously call a special election if you so desire, or you can appoint that individual to fill the term of the individual who has left service. So that's kind of in a nutshell what this amendment does. It also allows you some flexibility, and you can authorize whether that special election is a mail-in ballot alone. That's a policy decision for you to make at the time that that issue arises. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll start with you. All questions, comments?
No questions. I'm surprised to hear that nothing was laid out in ordinance prior to this, because I always understood the process to be one of a decision of the council, either to go for a special election or to appoint, and how that might play out. So
Well,
all
this
you're
is this is our relatively new by district election ordinance, so it wasn't contained in here.
Was it contained in our old ordinances before we went to it?
I don't think so.
Because it was just always understood that that was the methodology that was available to us. So it's just solidifying that as we move forward. This is a silly little sidebar on going to a 2-year term as mayor. That gives us more consistency at GSEC and more ability have a strong voice there.
I agree.
I'm in favor of this. And in fact, I think we need to look at terms also on some of our special committees that are a big hill to get to be productive. So I think that we
Interesting,
need to
okay.
look at that way.
Because we have term limits on those?
No,
thought we
No, we
because
should. Like right now, they
rather than
rotate.
changing them every year.
Right now, it's yearly, right?
You're
annually.
talking about the council's committee assignments?
Yes.
Yes,
We're
yeah.
saying like
PCWA or COJA 2x2.
Gotcha.
Staying longer to be productive.
Yeah, same thing.
Bill?
I had a question. Is the mayor still going to be rotated?
Yes.
And how is that going to happen?
every 2 years.
It'll be a 2-year cycle, and the council will need to give some policy direction at some point as to which seat you want to come up. So now currently, Councilmember Joyner would be scheduled to step up. But that's for the council to decide what you want your rotation to look like.
Okay.
So that.
Taking in mind the fact that 3, 4, and 5 go to election at the same time and 1 and 2 go to election at the same time.
Okay.
2 years apart.
So we still have to decide that.
Yes.
That's what we're doing tonight. Yeah.
Well, no, but we're not.
Or
So
we're not,
that's
we're
my
discussing
only.
it. Not tonight. We're going to bring it back. right?
That's my only
can.
concern with that is that, are we voting on this tonight or is this just informational only?
We can bring this back if you'd like.
I am in favor of moving to a 2-year term. I know that this discussion started when Dan was mayor. He didn't want to be mayor for 2 years. And then it was continued when I was mayor. I'm glad it's on Holly right now. Part of that might be because it was being mayor during a pandemic and that felt like a lot. But I also want to be really careful in what we're committing to, because it changes the dynamic of exactly what your city looks like. It changes council dynamics potentially. And the way it's written right now, it just changes the verbiage in that section to a 2-year term, but it puts it on council. And maybe this is what we want, but I feel like this needs a robust
So
discussion.
this has always been true, though. The council has always had the ability to bypass somebody in the rotation. They've
Right.
chosen not to do it.
Yeah,
I
maybe this
don't
might
love
help.
the wording is what I'm saying.
Is this helpful? Let me just read this so that everybody's on the same page. With respect to the selection of the mayor, district may be temporarily passed over based on the following factors, including but not limited to whether the council member is A, new to the city council, has not previously served as vice mayor, has recently served as mayor, is unavailable for ceremonial duties, or is disinterested in serving in the role of mayor.
So I don't love the verbiage personally. I would like to see it where it has a set rotation. So it's just like we rotate through each district, knowing that, so that residents know that there is some predictability of their jurisdiction, because now that we're in districts, having that seat rotate in. But I also, on the flip side, don't love that, let's say that there are reasons outside of what is prescribed in here that are valid reasons for a council to not want that individual to be mayor for 2 years. Well, our hands are tied. Why are we doing that to ourselves? Why don't we just have an out that says that person can be bypassed or removed by a majority vote of their peers and leave it to council to figure out?
It
if-
does say that.
But it also says specifics on when and how. So that could conceivably mean by a majority vote under these circumstances, or why else are we laying out these circumstances? Do you see what I'm saying? Like we are identifying specific circumstances by which that removal or bypassing process is appropriate, which could then be argued by a sitting mayor. No, you don't actually get to do that. I just feel like we're making it harder for ourselves. And I feel like we should, one, give predictability to our constituency that since we are now in districts, that each district would have a rotational, through that seat. And then if that person is unfit for any number of reasons that are maybe even yet to be determined, that the council has the authority to say, nope, you're not going to have this turn, or, hey, you got 1 year. We're going to pass it on to someone for a 1-year term next, and leave it broader. And so I like the concept. super supportive of the two-year. I don't like the way it's written.
I don't think the language that's there is all encompassing. It isn't saying only for these reasons.
But why are we laying it out then?
I
What's the
think
point of
that
it?
gives a bit of a soft landing for somebody. So let's say somebody who doesn't wish to be mayor to simply come forward and
Well,
say, I'd rather
I-
not do it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever forced to be mayor. I wasn't forced to be mayor.
You were forced to stay mayor for the
Can-
entire 12 years. or
Can
12
we,
months.
can we add then, and we can discuss this tonight or another time, can we add, so right now it says included but not limited to, but can we just add an or by a majority vote of their peers? Like, there might just be, hey, there's no good reason. I just don't like the way you're leading us. You're out.
And I don't have a problem with that.
You know what I
It's-
mean? Like, just give us a
I think what we're trying to
catch-all?
avoid is a very heated discussion at the dais that could rip the city apart.
but I mean, if you're
so
gonna
there have been heated conversations behind closed doors about just exactly that topic. But we would, with that change, have to bring it here in an open meeting, I would think.
Well, if you could have done it before on a closed session, why couldn't you do it after? Like, you're allowed to do that on closed session? I would think that that would always
No.
have to be a public.
No.
I would think that always have to be a this side of the dais thing, right? So for me, I hear you, but I also think that that is part of the form and function of government. And sometimes you get an objectionable individual who is like servicing themselves and not
True.
for the will of the council. And having sat in that seat, and I think we've all now, except for Bill, sat in that seat, the dynamic of the person who sits here, even though their vote doesn't matter any more than the rest of ours, their tone sets the tone for the city, the way they are either collaborative or not, the way that you choose to share information or not, the way you choose to place things on an agenda or not. It totally changes
Agree.
everything we're able to discuss publicly, the way that our dynamics are
It
together.
Certainly would make it combative because you have to fight against that.
If you
style.
even know to, because it can also make staff afraid of them. If you get a really objectionable person in there and now they're afraid of their own shadow, like that is a leadership position. And I would just like to see us have as much authority as possible if we're rotating into 2 years under the leadership of someone, that we also have like a hook in there that's just like, no,
Well,
you're
if-
out.
If your rotation is really just a guide, to your point, to say, hey, there will be an opportunity for each district to have a bite at being a mayor, right? You still can work in the nomination and second process to, for example, if you have an objectionable individual that's been rotating into the mayor and 3 council members are like, no way, then they simply don't second the motion and it dies and they have to move on.
Well, that's what I'm
right?
saying. I'd like to have it in there, just language that says, or removed by a
Yeah.
majority vote of your peers, just like here's limited to not to, but, or also, you don't even have to have a reason. You just have to have a majority vote and you're out. I also would like there to be a set rotational, like, I personally, I would like there to be some predictability. And then if it, for any number of factors, it changes in a year, it can change, but that way there's just, I feel like on one side, it creates predictability to the public on kind of like what their leadership structure could look like. And on the other side, it prevents potential, vying for that 2-year slot every year. Because if there's just this kind of expected rotation, then it's on you to not, you're like, maybe you don't want to do it. Maybe your career is too busy. Maybe your family life's too busy. Maybe you can't do a 2-year commitment and you're like, hey, I'm out on that. Or maybe you want it too much, right? I don't want that lobbying of individuals. A lot of councils elect their peer to that rotational mayor spot. I like that we don't. I'd like to see there be some sort of consistency where it's the opt-out, not the opt-in. But that's.
So what I would
me for
need
me.
for that is we could basically add a sentence that says commencing December of this year,
Right,
this is the rotation. So I would
Right.
just need
what that could look like.
direction from council as to who goes where. Is it 3, 4, 5, 1, 2? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? It's gonna need to be, well.
It needs to be
can
equitable as possible. And I should always pair a junior member, like the newly elected to someone in their 3rd and 4th term. Like the mayor should be if possible, it's their third and fourth year of their term, and a vice mayor being like
This is
instead of.
all getting a lot more complex than it
But
needs to
it
be.
is complex,
I don't
like,
know if
or
you can
potentially
I
you
don't know if you can do
have,
that all the time.
That's what you like.
Just
it's,
depends on
it
how the
is
election
complex.
goes.
It is setting up a process by which you have consistent leadership, or let's not mess with it until we have a process by which you have like consistent leadership.
I think the complication though is that if you're gonna, it's very difficult to marry the two ideas at the same time, right? So like having the rotational concept and having that be sort of the set way you do it, and then at the same time having a variety of qualifiers or disqualifiers, right? And then also trying to match up seniority, with a vice mayor. I worry that I'd want council to have as much control as possible over who it is, even if you were to strip it down and just say, hey, we nominate who we think is best for the two spots, and that's it. We just do it. for 2 years.
Maybe you even, maybe by saying that the mayor always has to be in there, have served at least 2 years prior. You at least in that way probably do get a rotation through the districts.
Yeah.
Right? Like what I would hate is to have my mayor and my vice mayor both be new.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be very difficult on the city. It takes a while to it's like drinking through a fire hose that first 6 months on council.
Yeah, so.
And I've been in government my whole adult career, and it still took me a good 6 months. So I feel like the learning curve probably is even longer than that normally. You can't do mayor on top
Well,
of it.
so I actually like that concept better of serving at least for 2 years. And that kind of sets the rotation instead of having the set number.
It actually potentially resets the rotation as well. If a district seat is now occupied by a newly elected individual, it jumps over them, but in theory, it should come back to them after the 2 years.
It could. And I like the idea of the vice mayor maybe being a newly elected, because that's 2 years of basically being in mentorship to be mayor the next, I don't mind
Yeah.
that. I'm more worried about the mayor being new than the vice mayor being new. All that to say, I like the idea. I don't know if tonight is the night we want to hash it out. I don't like the language as it's written. I think it could be better. I want to get it right because I think it's going to dictate the dynamics of the council of the future. And I'm sensitive to that because I think that right now we have a really exceptional council. We like each other. We're able to talk. We're able to get through really difficult things. I think we're able to communicate well through difficult conversations with each other, with others, with staff. That's not always guaranteed. We don't know who's going to be elected in the next cycle.
Well,
we don't know what that looks like. I want to set up a system that is foolproof.
Right, so,
But understand that at any time, a future council could change it all.
They can.
So-
But how many things do we say that about? But there's so many things we want to change, and it has to really rise to the cream of the crop to have the staff resources to change it. So I think they'd only change it if it's a problem. I don't want to set up a problem for them.
So here's something to think about, and I hesitate to say it because it's gonna sound self-serving and it's really not, right? Because I'm happy to do whatever you guys want to do. So if you think about what's coming up, if we start this new district rotation or whatever, at this next election and start with somebody other than my district, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But you are running for another office, there's a possibility that you could be elected, maybe not, right? You're not running again, or at least that's what you said, not to make it public, right? There's other changes happening. So theoretically, when our elections come up in November, you could be gone. And I mean, I'm hoping I get reelected.
And Bill would be here and could rotate into the role.
Well, he could, but if we are wanting to stick with the. I'm just saying that you would have somebody fairly new stepping into the mayor role.
But then he would be year 3, 4.
No,
One.
I'm almost willing to ask the table, let's bring it back.
What? I didn't-
I'm to the point of asking to bring this back.
I feel like it should be brought back so we can have
And
this
not about the 2 years, but about the rotation.
Right, what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it
What does it
matters.
look like when, yeah.
I think it matters. I like the
Yeah,
idea. I'm fully supportive. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't know why we're rushing it. I mean, you have the rest of the year to be.
I didn't.
No, no, I
bring
didn't
this
say you were.
forward.
I'm
Oh, right,
saying
no.
like.
No, I
No, no,
think
no, I know
all
you
of
did.
us-
What I'm saying is we have the rest of the year.
Being given that we were adopting.
And I appreciate, because we've been
Yeah.
talking about it for 2 years, or at least like it's been on
The
people's mind.
2-year thing.
The other,
The 2-year thing, but I think
Although
we
on
need to
the
get the
other item,
details.
I prefer if we have a vacancy, that council appoints someone to finish out that term and then they can run without, in a regular election.
I agree with that
Either
also.
way, we have the option,
Yes, yes.
and that's what you want,
Yeah.
because there are so many contingencies.
Right, if
When
you
do
can't
they
find the
leave?
right person to
Right,
appoint,
right.
what's
So this is
blah, blah,
public
blah.
hearing,
it
right?
gives you the option. Well,
Or not.
if we're sending it back, there's,
I'd like to send it back and to explore options for what a equitable rotation could look like. Not saying that we are, obviously, we're not subject to rotation, because at any time we could do the little hook and pull and no, you're not the leader that we want. But I would rather have an predictable rotation versus every 2 years, council's up here deciding what it looks like.
you can also have a city council policy on the mayoral rotation that's separate and apart from the ordinance, but is compliant with the ordinance. So that's something else to think
Why
about.
would we do that? Is that easier to change?
It's easier to change.
It still requires the same discussion and vote from us, though. Is it
No,
easier
no,
on
no.
the-
You don't have to notice it,
Right.
right? You
That's
don't
what I'm
have
saying,
to,
on the staff
yeah,
level.
it's not a
different.
60-day chaptering, none of that, right?
That's an option too. Maybe bring us back options of what the language could look like, the rotation could look like. If there's any strictures, like I like the idea of not ever having a mayor that's the first year on council. I think that sounds like a hot mess. But I like the idea. I will vote for a 2-year mayor if we get the right language. in
The
place.
right language.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's really any different than what we've always done. I don't think we would have, I can't think of a time that we have ever put a first year elected in the mayor's role. But there have probably been a conversation of, you know what? I don't know that I'm ready for this. Can we tap the brakes on me for a year?
But we've always had a very predictable, whether it was in code or not, it was a, hey, this is how many votes you got, this is how many votes you got, this is who's next in line, and that's just how it's gonna go. And it was predictable. And it made it where no one was fighting. You just knew
Right.
who came next.
So,
and
so
who
how is
came-
this changing it?
The language isn't in there anymore. There's no like specificity about how the next person rotates in, who's going to be mayor, who's going to be vice mayor, what that looks like. It's not in anything, and I think it should be. And if it's not, then it should be because we had a discussion that we don't want to. That's my 2 cents.
Historically, you could get in a position where you're not rotating totally. But there's always somebody that never makes it.
Oh.
Right, yeah, based on
Which
who
isn't
comes in
yeah.
next.
really fair either.
And historically, since you're using my line,
Which wasn't an issue though when you were at large, because everyone represented everyone, so it
right,
didn't
yeah.
matter to the public. This matters now.
what also happened, and it happened to me, I think it's happened to a few of you, is my first term, I came in and filled the seat that the immediate past mayor had. So I was, in my own mind, safe, was never going to have to be mayor during that first term. Well, it turned out that 2 people left the council, and suddenly in my 3rd year, I was
You
mayor.
never know what's gonna
See,
happen.
I think that's fine. I was mayor 3rd year and I felt completely equipped to handle it.
Well,
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I had a pandemic. What's your excuse? Just kidding.
Bring it back,
Same
but it would
thing.
be,
Right.
I guess what we really need to do is probably continue this to a date certain so that we don't have to notice it again.
Yeah.
So do we need to hash it out here, or is a workshop a better place to hash it out?
I'm looking.
well,
for
you still
Sean.
have to have.
Based on the length of just this discussion and some of the complexities, maybe it is best. I mean, what do you think, Christine? So do you think that it's best to, can they adopt, because it doesn't sound like there's any problem with the language, the body of the language, it's really just about the special election component. That seems like that's pretty well decided upon. It's just really the mayoral rotation and the 2-year component that wanted to get deep dove. So is there a way for us to approve the body of the work that you've done? And the only section that you've changed in the other paragraph is just the 2 to 1, right?
literally one word in the other section.
So are they allowed to,
Like, can we
approve-
adopt the
Wait,
new
wait.
sections, but like bifurcate the amended section and bring that back to a date certain and workshop that?
Someone could make a motion adopting the amendment of section I, adding that, but not the revision that's in paragraph G.
I like that idea.
the alternative is you could just simply approve what you have because you know you want to make it a 2-year. or
I don't want to
think
do
you-
that.
Okay, so.
I don't like voting for things I know I don't like.
Do we have to make,
I get it.
do we have to make a decision tonight?
No,
No, we
that's what we're
don't.
saying.
And
I'd
this is
rather
all
workshop
getting
it.
so,
She's mayor until
You don't.
November.
this is
It
all
just
getting
happened.
so cluttered that let's,
Any part of it.
Continue it.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's no urgency to it.
Yeah.
We're not changing that
Well,
lower section.
well, I think what Christine's trying to say is that we can either just simply, this dies today and we renotice sometime in the future, or we renotice to a date specific, which is usually only 1 or 2 meetings, right?
Right, which I'm not confident that we would necessarily have, that we don't necessarily have the direction from you to be able to
Right,
craft this the
right.
way that.
Yeah, it'd be better just to cancel it completely and put a workshop together. You can hash it out and then we'll bring exactly what you want.
Sorry to
the
be
way you
all
want it.
wordsmithy. I just feel like policy matters.
It does.
And in the wrong hands, it can turn into a disaster.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So it sounds like this is going to die for lack of a motion. This is on the agenda, so you may still want to open it up for public comment.
But thank you for your work on it because I like it. I just think we're like 80% there.
Mr. Chapman, go ahead.
Once again, Byron Chapman, Madam Mayor, council members, city staff. I read over this a couple of times at home over the last, no, not quite a week. And what I'm really hearing is it's almost like you guys are trying to fix something that's not broke. I mean, I understand the process, and what I've noticed anyway is that one idea that was thrown out now creates another idea in someone else's mind, and now it's bounced across and around the room for the last 10, 15 minutes. And once again, I just have to say, maybe you just want to look at what's wrong with the whole idea of having one person mayor and then going on. Because I'll tell you, the statistics are that if you guys can determine who's going to be elected on any given election, you may as well go out and fill out the lotto numbers because you're going to be able to win. Right now, you guys are theorizing on something that you have no who's going to be in what position and why are you fixing something that don't broke? And I understand that you have districts. I understand all of that. But all of you, based on who is here and how much time they have, will determine how that works out. I just don't know why you're making it that so difficult. Thank you.
Can I respond just real quick?
Sure. Thank you, Mr.
I
Chapman.
think that the answer to that is that it is partially broken. It's hard to do 1 year, learn all of the things you have to do, and then you leave and the next person spends the next 6 months trying to pick up the pieces. It's not in the best interest of the residents. If you had consistent leadership that had some continuity to it, it would be easier on staff. And I think that it's easier for that mantle of the mayor to actually accomplish what's necessary.
Right, well, and not even just learning, but there's things, like you said, want to get accomplished. You have projects, things are moving forward and you're gaining steam, and then all of a sudden the year's over. So,
So I think I'll add to that, if I may, as somebody who served 3 terms as mayor. You almost lose your ability to influence as mayor in your last couple of months. So up to about your 10th month, you have influence, you can direct things, people begin to look towards the next mayor at that point in time. And so a 2-year term gives you the ability to really bring forward the issues that you want to bring forward, to see them through the process and to give an outcome.
Not only that is I feel like, and maybe my experience was unique given the time period under which I was mayor. There were just, people had very unique issues, but right, like people knew to reach out to me, and there were very personal issues and
Right,
very
always.
big problems and weighty things that were emotional for people. And then I rotated out and they were still contacting me,
Right.
but it was no longer under my leadership to connect you. It was now I have to connect you to the new mayor. And I think in a 2-year period of term, yeah, there's going to be some of those one-offs where some of that's going to linger. But most of the time, issues will resolve over a certain amount of time. So having a little bit longer of a leadership, I think also allows the public to have that relationship of trust. And for me, I wasn't looking to influence council as much as trying to like be responsive to the community. And it felt like a very harsh, okay, and now in the middle of this crisis, you don't talk to me anymore. And now I'm trying to download to Holly, here's who's what, and a lot of it didn't happen. Some of it was just lost in translation and she's getting all these one-off emails from me.
And we're kind of saying the same thing.
Right. And so I do feel like that 2-year could just ease the pain of it a little for the people who reach out.
And I don't know that Mr. Chapman disagrees with that. It was more the nuances that we were debating.
Right. But that
in
was
the
the
rotation.
genesis of this discussion over the last few years. It's how do you make it easier on you really to know and be able to, sometimes, as you know, you have real personal concerns with things and now you're having to rehash it all with the new leader who didn't have any of that downloaded. It just feels like having a 2-year might just ease some of that and make it just a little softer.
Okay.
It could,
Yeah.
which is why I want the hook in there.
Gwen, excuse me, Gwen, any comments on Zoom? No? Okay. All right. Well, then we will bring it back later. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys. for
Sorry to be
bringing
the
that.
pain. I know I always am. The
Okay.
theme of the night.
So we handled general business earlier. Council initiated business. Anybody have any council initiated business? Okay, Bill.
I said the one item, at the last meeting, I brought up the issue of the Firewise Council. I didn't see it in the minutes, but I still think we should consider joining it.
Oh, Fire Safety Council.
Yeah, the County Fire Safety Council.
Did you talk to your dad, Chief?
I always talk to my dad.
I mean, about that.
Yeah. Yep, and they're ready to bring Lincoln on whenever we decide to do it.
Okay.
I talked to him last night too at the MAC meeting, so he wants to.
Okay, thanks, Bill. All right, any information items?
Yeah, I do. Does anyone else have one?
I just wanted to remind everybody about Sean's reception tomorrow in the plaza at 5. So anybody listening and watching, you're invited.
Come on out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alyssa. I'm looking for the data, even though I know it. I should know it. I'm on the board. All right. So it seemed like organics was the theme of the night tonight. And just like a reminder to my colleagues, this Friday, March 25th in Folsom is the Sacramento Valley Division for the Cal Cities. Our general membership meeting, quarterly membership meeting is going to be held in Folsom. And the league's lobbyist, Derek Dolphy, who I now coined the czar of solid waste, organics, everything, should be presenting. He may be on a plane, so someone else may be presenting for him, but he is on the list of one of the topics that's going to be discussed. And they have like $180 million budget ask. They have a bill going through to try and make all of this process. There's some, as you saw, it's a very complex law. There's parts that are just not going to be easy for us to be able to achieve, like any city, and they're trying to find a softer landing spot for it. And he's going to be updating the full membership on that, which should be very informative and interesting. I can make sure that you guys have the form to register if you haven't, if you want to go. I believe it starts at 1:30 to 3:30. It should be a good program.
Anybody else? Any other information items? All right, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.